The silence in the command center felt wrong. Major Sarah Brennan had learned to trust her instincts during 5 years of flying AF-15 E-Strike Eagles, and right now every nerve ending screamed danger. She stood motionless before the bank of screens, watching blue strobes pulse against the topographical map of Devil's Throat Valley, 381 Navy SEALs trapped in a natural depression that had become, in 90 brutal minutes, a killing ground. Then the radio crackled to life. Trident actual to command. We are surrounded. All sides. Estimate 800 hostiles. Heavy weapons. SAM sites confirmed on east and west ridges. Another voice cut in, controlled but tense. Command, this is Lieutenant Garcia. Ammunition at 30% and falling. Multiple casualties. Requesting immediate air support. We need a way out. In the belly of Luke Air Force Base, Arizona, General David Warner stood motionless before the central display. The topographical map of Devil's Throat Valley glowed in unforgiving red, where hostiles had been marked. Blue strobes indicated the trapped men, huddled in a natural depression that had become, in the space of 90 minutes, a killing ground. 381 Navy SEALs, the nation's finest warriors, caught in a trap with textbook precision. Warner's face betrayed nothing as his eyes moved from the map to the casualty projection scrolling on his tablet. He had been in command for 27 years. He had written letters to families. He had attended funerals. But never like this. Never so many at once. Sir, the communications officer said, F-16 squadron reports ready for deployment. ETA to target zone 14 minutes. Warner nodded but said nothing. The hard truth of Devil's Throat lay naked on the screens around him. The topography created a unique problem. The SEALs were pinned down with hostiles on multiple ridgelines, all within 100 meters. Air support protocol prohibited strikes that close to friendly forces. The squadron would arrive only to circle helplessly while men died below. Begin drafting the loss report, Warner said finally. The room grew quieter still. Everyone understood what those words meant. In the far corner of the command center, Major Sarah Brennan watched the scene unfold. At 29, she was among the youngest officers in the room, her dark hair pulled back in a regulation knot that emphasized sharp cheekbones and eyes that revealed nothing of her thoughts. She wore her flight suit like she had worn it for decades, though in truth it had only been 5 years since she'd earned her wings. 5 years since her father had pinned them on her chest, the last time she had seen him alive. Her gaze moved between the Valley schematic and General Warner. She did not focus on the impossible terrain or the overwhelming odds. She studied the pattern. The hostiles had established overlapping fields of fire with clear lanes of retreat for themselves. The SEAL team had been deliberately channeled into the killing zone by a series of small engagements designed to appear as tactical retreats by the enemy. This was not a chance encounter. This was a calculated ambush executed with military precision. The pattern was familiar to her. She had studied it for hundreds of hours in simulation. She had drawn it from memory during sleepless nights. It was the same pattern that had killed her father. 8-year-old Sarah Brennan sat cross-legged on the living room carpet, eyes fixed on the television. January 17, 1991. The sky over Baghdad erupted with anti-aircraft fire that looked to her young eyes like reverse falling stars. The camera shook as reporters ducked for cover. "Daddy's there," she whispered, clutching the small model F-15 her father had given her before deployment. Robert Brennan, Major, United States Air Force, was leading the first wave of strikes in Operation Desert Storm. Her mother sat on this couch behind her, one hand resting on Sarah's shoulder, the other pressed against her mouth. The news anchor's voice competed with the sound of distant explosions. "The air campaign has begun in earnest," the anchor reported. "Coalition forces are conducting precision strikes against Iraqi command and control centers. We're getting reports that F-15 E-Strike Eagles are at the forefront of this operation." Sarah held the model plane tighter. She knew her father flew the E model, the one they called the Strike Eagle, the fastest, the most advanced. The best, he had told her. She had memorized every detail of the aircraft from the cutaway diagrams he had shown her. She knew the thrust-to-weight ratio, the combat radius, the weapons loadout. She knew these things because he had taught her, always treating her questions with the same seriousness he might give a fellow pilot. "He'll be okay," her mother said. though Sarah heard the uncertainty beneath the words. "Of course he will," Sarah replied with absolute conviction. "He's flying the Eagle." Later that night, when the phone finally rang, her mother answered with trembling hands. Sarah watched her face transform from fear to relief to pride. "He's safe," her mother said after hanging up. Mission accomplished. In the days that followed, Sarah watched every news report, collected newspaper clippings, and waited for her father to come home. When he finally returned 3 months later, thinner and somehow older looking, she ran to him on the tarmac, model plane still clutched in her hand. "Tell me everything," she demanded as he scooped her up. Robert Brennan looked at his daughter with tired eyes that still managed to twinkle. "Not everything, sweetheart, but I'll tell you what matters." He set her down and crouched to meet her gaze. "What matters is that when things got tough, nobody got left behind. We all came home." The memory dissolved as Sarah refocused on the command center. 21 years had passed since that day on the tarmac. Her father had kept his promise then, bringing everyone home. He had kept that promise through 3 more deployments, until the last one, until Devil's Throat. She looked again at the Valley schematic, at the trapped SEALs, and at the commanding officer who had already accepted defeat. A different memory surfaced now, sharper and more painful. The academy graduation, 5 years ago. Her father, now Colonel Robert Brennan, resplendent in his dress uniform, pinning wings to her chest, his hand steady, his voice breaking slightly with pride. "You earned these, sweetheart. No shortcuts, no favors. You're the best pilot in your class because you worked harder than anyone else." Later, at the small family gathering, he had taken her aside. "There's something else I need to give you," he said, pressing a small notebook into her hand. "I've been developing new close air support tactics for extreme terrain environments, the kind where conventional approaches fail." She had thumbed through pages of meticulous notes, diagrams, and calculations. "Why give this to me?" she had asked. "Because you'll understand it," he replied simply, "and because someday you might need it." 5 months later, he was gone. A training accident near the Mexican border, the official report said. Aircraft lost due to mechanical failure in difficult terrain. But Sarah knew better. Her father never lost control of his aircraft, never failed to account for terrain. His final mission had been classified, details redacted, the truth buried with him. Sarah had spent the 5 years since then building a career marked by technical excellence and emotional restraint. She had also spent those years investigating her father's death in private, methodically gathering fragments of information from pilots who had known him, from mission reports with inconsistently redacted sections, from topographical studies of the area where he was lost. And she had spent countless night hours in the simulator, practicing the techniques from his notebook. Techniques that violated standard protocols, but achieved what those protocols deemed impossible: effective close air support in extreme terrain with hostiles within the minimum safe distance of friendly forces. In the command center, the radio crackled again. "Trident, actual to command. We've identified the hostiles. They're the border ghosts. Repeat, border ghosts. They have insignia matching the group responsible for the Richardson massacre." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. The border ghosts, a paramilitary organization with advanced training and equipment that had emerged along the southern border 5 years ago. 5 years. The timing aligned perfectly with her father's last mission. "Requesting sitrep on air support," the radio continued. General Warner took the microphone himself. "Trident actual, this is General Warner. We have F-16 inbound, 14 minutes out. However, be advised that minimum safe distance requirements will severely limit their effectiveness given your position." The silence that followed spoke volumes. Then, "Understood, Command. We'll hold as long as we can." Warner set down the microphone and turned to his staff. "Options. I need options." The room filled with technical discussion. Helicopter extraction deemed impossible due to confirmed SAM sites. Ground reinforcements too distant. Artillery out of range, all roads leading back to the same grim conclusion. Sarah moved forward, positioning herself in Warner's line of sight. "Sir, I have a proposition." Warner regarded her with mild surprise, as if noticing her presence for the first time. "Go ahead, Major." "I can provide the necessary air support. F-15E Strike Eagle with modified approach vectors that will allow engagement within the minimum safe distance parameters." The room fell silent. Colonel Michael Iron Thompson, the Air Wing commander and her direct superior, stepped forward. Impossible. The terrain creates specific constraints that make such engagements suicidal at best, ineffective at worst. With respect, sir, I've developed and simulated tactical modifications that account for those constraints. I can put ordnance within 25 meters of friendly forces while maintaining necessary precision. 25 meters? Thompson's voice rose in disbelief. Protocol states 100 meters minimum. There's a reason for that, Major. The protocol assumes standard engagement parameters, Sarah countered. My approach uses terrain masking combined with vertical offset targeting to change those parameters. This is theoretical at best, Thompson dismissed. We're talking about real lives, not simulator scores. Sarah met his gaze directly. I've run this simulation over 200 times with a 97% success rate. The approach is sound. It's reckless, Thompson said flatly, and I won't authorize it. Sarah understood his resistance ran deeper than military protocol. Michael Thompson had been her father's closest friend, his wingman for 15 years. He had been the one to notify her family when her father was lost. He had made a promise at the funeral, his hand on her shoulder, voice rough with grief. I'll look after her, Robert. You have my word. In Thompson's mind, protecting her meant keeping her away from exactly the kind of mission that had taken her father. But Sarah saw something different in the current situation. She saw a chance to prevent history from repeating itself, to save lives where her father could not. Sir, she addressed General Warner directly, 381 Americans are about to die while we debate protocol. I can prevent that. Warner studied her for a long moment. Your father was one of the finest pilots I ever knew, Major Brennan. But even he would consider this beyond the pale. My father, Sarah replied carefully, would never leave men behind if he had any means to save them. Before Warner could respond, the radio crackled again. Command, this is Trident Actual. We've identified their commander, Diego Cordero, call sign El Cuchillo. Former Special Forces went rogue 3 years ago. Sarah felt her chest tighten. Diego Cordero. The name appeared in several redacted documents related to her father's final mission. She had only pieced it together through months of careful investigation. Be advised, the radio continued. They're setting up for a final push. We're repositioning for last stand defense. Time on ammunition approximately 20 minutes. Warner turned back to the screens, deliberating. Sarah could see the weight of command in the set of his shoulders. Finally, he shook his head. Major Brennan, your proposition is denied. The risk is too great. Colonel Thompson, prepare the F-16S for standard support protocol. They may not be able to engage directly, but their presence might buy some time. Yes, sir. Thompson nodded, shooting Sarah a warning glance that clearly said stand down. Sarah remained at attention, outwardly compliant, but her mind was already calculating. 20 minutes of ammunition, 12 minutes flight time to Devil's Throat in the A-15E, another 7 minutes before the F-16S would arrive, only to find themselves constrained by protocols that rendered them effectively useless. In those minutes, men would die. Men like those her father had sworn to protect. Men who were facing the same enemy that had taken her father from her. Sarah stepped out of the command center, moving with deliberate calm toward the corridor. Once out of sight, she quickened her pace. The decision crystallized with each step. Protocol existed to save lives. When protocol itself became the obstacle to that primary mission, the choice became clear. In the quiet of the women's locker room, Sarah opened her personal locker and retrieved the small notebook her father had given her. She added a single line to the last page. If you're reading this, I acted because 381 Americans were dying while protocol argued with itself. Dad, this one's for you. She tucked the notebook into her flight suit and moved with purpose toward the hangar, mind shifting fully into operational mode. The F-15E assigned to her for today's training sortie would be fueled and armed. Standard loadout for training included live ammunition for target practice. Not optimal for the mission she had in mind, but sufficient. Sarah entered the hangar through the side entrance, bypassing the usual pre-flight procedures. At this hour, with attention focused on the crisis in Devil's Throat, the maintenance crews were gathered in the break room, following the situation on monitors. Only a junior technician remained with the aircraft, doing final checks on her F-15E. Martinez, she called to the young man. Is my bird ready? The technician looked up, surprised. Yes, ma'am. Full fuel, standard training loadout. But I thought all non-emergency flights were grounded due to the situation. Change of plans, Sarah said, adopting the tone of someone following orders rather than defying them. I need a full combat loadout immediately. General Warner's orders. Martinez hesitated only briefly before nodding. Yes, ma'am. I can have that ready in 15 minutes. Make it 10, Sarah said. Lives depend on it. Avante. As Martinez hurried to comply, Sarah began her pre-flight inspection. The F-15E Strike Eagle stood before her, a marvel of American engineering. 57 feet long, wingspan just over 40 feet, capable of speeds above Mach 2.5. Her father had called it the most forgiving, unforgiving aircraft ever built. Forgiving of pilot input, unforgiving of mistakes. She ran her hands along the fuselage, a gesture both practical and reverent. The aircraft had always been more than machinery to her. It represented freedom, purpose, and connection to her father. Today, it would represent something more, the line between life and death for hundreds of men. Sarah climbed up and inspected the cockpit, running through mental checklists with practiced efficiency. Martinez and two other technicians worked below, mounting additional weapons with remarkable speed. Sarah suspected they understood more about the situation than they let on. They worked with grim determination, saying nothing but exchanging looks that spoke volumes. When the loadout was complete, Sarah thanked them with a nod. Martinez looked up at her, hesitating before speaking. My cousin is with SEAL Team 3, ma'am. If he's there, I'll bring him home, Sarah promised. All of them. She settled into the cockpit, the space conforming to her body like a second skin. The pre-flight sequence flowed through her hands without conscious thought, each switch and dial exactly where muscle memory expected it to be. The twin Pratt and Whitney engines rumbled to life beneath her, their vibration traveling up through the airframe and into her body. Sarah engaged her communication system, but left the primary command channel muted. Instead, she opened the emergency tactical frequency. Tower, this is Lightning 37, requesting immediate clearance for takeoff. Priority mission directive. The tower controller responded with confusion. Lightning 37, we show no priority mission scheduled. Please clarify authorization. Sarah took a deep breath. With her next words, she would cross a line from which there would be no return. Tower, 381 Americans are about to die in Devil's Throat. I'm the only one who can stop it. Either clear me for takeoff or I'll clear myself. Silence stretched for 10 long seconds. Then, Lightning 37, you are cleared for immediate takeoff on runway 27. Godspeed, Major. Sarah taxied into position, advancing the throttles with measured precision. The F-15E responded instantly, gathering speed down the runway. At precisely the right moment, she pulled back on the stick, feeling the subtle resistance, and then release as the wheels left the ground and the aircraft became fully hers to command. Banking southeast toward Devil's Throat, Sarah activated her tactical systems and reviewed the mission parameters she had committed to memory. The valley stretched 30 miles along the Arizona-Mexico border, a natural corridor through harsh mountain terrain that had been used by smugglers for generations. Its narrowest point, where the SEALs were trapped, presented the perfect ambush location. High ridge lines on three sides, limited visibility, and minimal room for maneuver. As she accelerated to supersonic speed, Sarah opened the emergency channel again. Trident Actual, this is Lightning 37. Inbound to your position ETA 11 minutes. Mark your positions with infrared strobes if available. The response came immediately, surprise evident despite the professional tone. Lightning 37, this is Trident Actual. Confirm authorization for close air support within minimum safe distance. I'm authorized to save Americans, Sarah replied. Prepare your men for extraction. Sarah pushed the F-15E harder, feeling the G-forces building as she maneuvered. Each second counted now. The aircraft's heads-up display showed her approaching Mach 1.8, the frame vibrating with barely contained power. The G-suit compressed around her legs and abdomen, fighting against the physiological effects of high-speed maneuvers. The radio crackled again, this time on the command frequency she had left open, but muted. General Warner's voice filled her helmet. Major Brennan, this is General Warner. Return to base immediately. You are flying without authorization into a restricted combat zone. This is a direct order. Acknowledge. Sarah reached forward and silenced the channel. Her course was set. The only voice she needed to hear now was Trident Actual, the man on the ground with 380 lives in his hands. Lightning 3-7, this is Trident Actual. Infrared markers activated. Be advised, we have confirmed multiple shoulder-launched surface-to-air missile systems on the ridges. Approach with caution. Copy that, Trident, Sarah replied. I see your markers, preparing for initial run. The valley opened up before her, exactly as the topographical displays had shown, yet infinitely more complex in reality. Sunlight glinted off the ridgelines, casting long shadows across the natural bowl, where the blue infrared strobes marked the SEAL position. Around them, muzzle flashes indicated the encircling hostile forces. Sarah's training took over, her mind calculating angles, speeds, and weapon release points. But beneath that technical focus burned a deeper awareness. The men below were facing the same enemy that had taken her father. Diego Cordero, the man whose name appeared in the redacted files, was down there, directing the assault that would kill hundreds of Americans if she failed. For an instant, her father's face flashed before her mind's eye. Not the formal portrait that hung in the officers' club, but the way he had looked the last time she saw him alive. Confident, determined, passing his legacy directly to her with those silver wings. Time to earn these, she whispered to herself, pushing the aircraft into a steep dive. The G-forces mounted instantly, her vision narrowing as blood rushed from her head. Sarah executed the anti-G straining maneuver with practiced precision, tightening her leg and abdominal muscles while controlling her breathing in short, forceful exhales. The specialized G-suit helped, constricting her lower body to prevent blood pooling. Even so, the physical strain was immense. Through the momentary gray at the edges of her vision, Sarah focused on the primary target, a heavy machine gun position on the eastern ridge that was pouring fire into the SEAL position. Standard protocol would keep her at least 100 meters from friendly forces. Her approach would bring her within 25. Sarah activated the targeting system, watching as the reticle aligned with the machine gun nest. At this distance, with this angle, the margin for error was measured in milliseconds and inches. Too soon, and her ordnance would land among friendly forces. Too late, and the hostiles would escape unscathed. Any miscalculation of wind, altitude, or release point would be catastrophic. This was the moment where her father's teachings diverged from standard Air Force doctrine. His notebook had detailed a technique he called vertical offset targeting that accounted for extreme terrain variables by approaching from specific angles that maximized gravitational effects on munitions. Sarah had practiced it hundreds of times in simulation. Now, American lives depended on her execution being perfect on the first attempt. Trident Actual, this is Lightning 3-7, East Ridge target acquired. Danger close. Brace your men. Without waiting for acknowledgement, Sarah executed the attack run. Her finger pressed the weapon release at precisely the calculated moment, then immediately banked hard right, subjecting herself to punishing G-forces as she cleared the immediate airspace. Through her canopy, she watched as her ordnance found its mark with surgical precision. The machine gun position erupted in a contained explosion, exactly where she had aimed, not a meter closer to the friendly forces below. Direct hit! Trident's voice held controlled excitement. Eastern gun is silent. You're walking rounds within 20 meters of our position. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Sarah allowed herself a fraction of a second's satisfaction before banking for another approach. The second target was on the northern ridge, a mortar team raining high explosive shells on the SEAL position. This approach would be even more challenging, requiring her to thread between two ridgelines while maintaining precise weapons delivery. As she lined up for the second run, a warning tone sounded in her helmet. Surface-to-air missile tracking system activated on the western ridge. They were painting her aircraft with targeting radar. Sarah had seconds to decide, evade and leave the SEALs under mortar fire, or complete her attack run and risk being shot down. The choice was already made before the question fully formed. She continued her approach, adjusting her angle slightly to present the smallest radar profile to the SAM site. The missile launch warning screamed in her ears as she acquired the mortar position in her sights. Missile launch detected, her aircraft's automated system announced with mechanical calm. Sarah released her ordnance on the mortar team, banked hard left, and deployed countermeasures in a single fluid sequence. Chaff and flares dispersed behind her as she drove the F-15E into a punishing evasive maneuver, using the eastern ridge to mask her heat signature from the incoming missile. The G-forces spiked to nearly 8 times gravity as she pulled through the turn. Even with the G-suit and straining techniques, Sarah felt consciousness beginning to slip. The gray at the edges of her vision expanded inward as blood drained from her brain despite her body's desperate countermeasures. "Stay with it," she growled through clenched teeth, fighting to remain conscious through sheer will. Her father's voice seemed to echo in her mind. "The aircraft responds to confidence. Show fear and it will fail you. Show courage and there's nothing it can't do." The missile tracking tone faded as her countermeasures and terrain masking did their work. Through clearing vision, Sarah saw her second strike had eliminated the mortar position. Below, the SEALs were already adjusting their defensive perimeter, taking advantage of the sudden absence of fire from 2 critical sectors. "Lightning, this is Trident. Northern mortar eliminated. Western ridge still active. Heavy machine gun bunker at our 10 o'clock, 70 meters from our position." 70 meters. Still well within the prohibited zone for close air support. Still well within her capabilities using her father's techniques. Sarah banked toward the western ridge, already calculating her approach. As she did, her radio crackled with a new voice. "Lightning 3-7, this is Colonel Thompson. Return to base immediately. You are violating direct orders." For the first time since taking off, Sarah responded to the command channel. "Unable to comply, sir. Men on the ground need air support that only I can provide." "Damn it, Sarah." Thompson's voice lost its formal edge. "Your father would never want you to throw your life away like this." "My father," Sarah replied evenly, "taught me that no one gets left behind. I'm just following his example." She muted the channel again and focused on her next attack run. The western ridge presented a new challenge. The machine gun bunker was partially concealed by an overhanging rock formation, limiting her angle of approach. Standard tactics would deem it unreachable without placing friendlies at risk. Sarah recalled page 43 of her father's notebook. Terrain-restricted engagement parameters. The diagrams and calculations precisely described the situation, offering a solution that defied conventional wisdom, but adhered to the immutable laws of physics. "Trident, I'm engaging the western bunker. Be advised, I'll be coming in low and fast from your 4 o'clock. Keep your heads down." "Copy that, Lightning. We're secure." Sarah brought the F-15E around in a wide arc, bleeding altitude until she was dangerously close to the valley floor. The proximity warning systems blared in protest as terrain features registered within minimum safe distances. She silenced them with practiced movements. This approach required her to trust her training and her aircraft more than any automated warning system. The F-15E screamed across the valley floor, just 200 feet above ground level, approaching the western ridge from an angle that would appear suicidal to conventional tactical assessment. At this height, at this speed, she would have less than 2 seconds to acquire the target, release weapons, and pull up before impacting the ridge. Sarah felt a strange calm descend as she entered those critical seconds. Time seemed to slow. Her hands moved with precision born from thousands of hours in the cockpit. The targeting reticle aligned perfectly with the bunker just as she began her vertical climb along the ridge face. Weapons release came at the precise moment calculated in her father's equations. The ordnance followed a trajectory that looked wrong to conventional tactical doctrine, but was mathematically perfect for the unique terrain features present. It struck the bunker from below, exploiting the single vulnerability in its otherwise excellent defensive position. Sarah hauled back on the stick with all her strength, the F-15E's nose pitching up sharply as she climbed away from the ridge. G-forces slammed into her once more as the aircraft transitioned from horizontal to vertical flight in seconds. This time, the physical strain crossed the threshold her training could fully counteract. Her vision tunneled to a pinpoint, then momentarily went black. When consciousness fully returned an instant later, Sarah found herself climbing through 10,000 feet, her aircraft intact, the valley falling away behind her. On the radio, Trident Actual was reporting, "Western bunker neutralized. Lightning, that was impossible. Possible. You just put ordnance into a position our forward observers deemed unreachable." Sarah allowed herself a small smile as she banked back toward the valley. "Nothing's unreachable with the right approach, Trident. What's next on the target list?" For the next 12 minutes, Sarah executed a series of precision strikes against the encircling hostile forces. Each attack defied conventional close air support doctrine. Each succeeded where standard approaches would have failed. With every pass, the perimeter around the trap seals widened, creating the breathing room they desperately needed. In the command center at Luke Air Force Base, General Warner watched the unfolding situation with growing amazement. The tactical display showed the blue friendly indicators consolidating their position as red hostile markers were systematically eliminated in precisely the sectors that most threatened evacuation routes. "How is she doing this?" he asked, almost to himself. Colonel Thompson stood beside him, his earlier anger replaced by a complex mixture of pride and concern. "Robert Brennan's techniques," he said quietly. "He was developing unconventional close air support methodologies before his last mission. I dismissed them as too risky, too theoretical." He shook his head. "It appears his daughter didn't share my caution." On the main screen, Sarah's F-15E appeared as a single blue arrow, moving with impossible precision through terrain that should have made such maneuvers suicidal. With each pass, more hostile positions went dark. "Sir," the communications officer interrupted. "Trident actual reports they now have a viable extraction corridor to the southeast, requesting helicopter support." Warner hesitated only briefly. "Launch the rescue birds. Get our men out of there." Within minutes, 4 Black Hawk helicopters were airborne, racing toward the newly secured corridor. Sarah's voice came through the command channel, which she had reopened now that the immediate crisis had passed. "Command, this is Lightning 3-7. I've suppressed the primary SAM sites, but I'm tracking additional mobile launchers on the southern perimeter. Request permission to engage and provide cover for extraction." Warner keyed his microphone. "Permission granted, Major Brennan, and well done." In the valley, Sarah continued her one-woman assault on the border ghost positions. With the immediate threat to the SEALs diminished, she turned her attention to the southern perimeter, where intelligence indicated Diego Cordero might be directing operations, the man connected to her father's death. As she lined up for an attack run on a suspected command post, her threat warning system blared again. 2 heat-seeking missiles launched simultaneously from concealed positions she hadn't detected. Sarah deployed countermeasures and executed a series of violent evasive maneuvers, but the missiles had been launched from optimal positions. One detonated harmlessly in her chaff cloud. The second continued tracking. In a split-second decision, Sarah drove the F-15E toward the eastern ridge, then executed a maneuver her instructors had specifically warned against. A high-G, low-altitude direction reversal that put catastrophic stress on both aircraft and pilot. The missile, unable to match the extreme turn rate, impacted the ridge face, but the maneuver had cost her. Warning lights flashed across her instrument panel, hydraulic pressure dropping, fuel system compromised, right engine performance degraded. "Lightning, this is Trident. First extraction birds are touching down. What's your status?" Sarah quickly assessed her aircraft's condition. The F-15E was damaged but still flyable. She had enough fuel and weapons to continue providing cover for the extraction. "Still in the fight, Trident. Focus on getting your men out. I'll keep them off your backs." Through her canopy, Sarah spotted the Black Hawks landing in the cleared area near the SEAL position. Men began moving quickly toward the aircraft, carrying their wounded. On the ridgelines, the remaining hostiles were regrouping, preparing to contest the extraction. Sarah targeted these positions methodically, preventing them from bringing effective fire on the helicopters. With each attack run, her damaged aircraft protested more loudly. Warning indicators multiplied across her instrument panel. The right engine was now operating at 60% efficiency. Fuel was draining from a compromised line. 2 birds away, Trident reported. 150 personnel extracted. 2 more inbound for the remainder. Sarah acknowledged, banking toward a new threat on the northern ridge. As she did, something caught her eye. A small convoy of vehicles moving rapidly along a concealed track toward the extraction point. Leading the convoy was a distinctive black SUV with a single occupant. The targeting system identified the driver when she zoomed in. Diego Cordero, the man from the redacted files, the man connected to her father's death. Sarah faced another choice: continue providing general cover for the extraction, or pursue Cordero personally. The professional choice was clear. The personal one pulled at her with undeniable force. "Focus on the mission," she told herself firmly. Her father would have prioritized the men on the ground over personal vendettas. So would she. Sarah turned away from Cordero's convoy and targeted a machine gun team moving into position to fire on the landing zone. Her strike eliminated the threat just as the third Black Hawk touched down. "Third bird loading now," Trident reported. 75% of personnel extracted. Final helicopter 4 minutes out. Sarah continued circling, providing cover as the extraction progressed. Her aircraft's condition worsened with each maneuver. Fuel levels approached critical. The right engine now operated at less than 50%. Multiple systems showed damage from the stress of combat maneuvering and proximity to enemy fire. Below, the third helicopter lifted off, heavy with evacuated SEALs. Only one group remained on the ground with Trident Actual, waiting for the final Black Hawk. "Lightning, this is Trident. Final bird inbound. You've saved a lot of lives today." Sarah allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. But it was short-lived. Her threat warning system screamed once more. Multiple missile launches from the southern perimeter, directly from the area where Cordero's convoy had disappeared into a concealed position. This time, there were too many to evade, and her damaged aircraft had lost the performance edge that might have saved her. Sarah made her final choice without hesitation. "Trident, missiles inbound from the south, I'm moving to intercept." She banked hard, placing her F-15E directly between the incoming missiles and the extraction point. Deploying her remaining countermeasures, Sarah dived toward the launch position, targeting systems locked on Cordero's last known location. The missiles tracked her instead of the helicopter, exactly as she had intended. 2 detonated in her chaff cloud. A third exploded close enough to send shrapnel into her left engine, causing immediate failure warnings. With one functioning engine operating at less than 50%, multiple critical systems compromised, and fuel reaching minimum levels, Sarah completed her attack run on Cordero's position. Her final ordnance struck with precision, triggering a secondary explosion that confirmed her target had been a weapons cache. "Direct hit on southern position," she reported, fighting to maintain control of her increasingly unresponsive aircraft. "Hostile fire suppressed." Through the smoke and chaos below, Sarah saw the final Black Hawk touch down, the remaining SEALs rushing aboard. Trident Actual was the last to board, pausing to look up at her aircraft as it struggled across the sky. "Lightning, all personnel aboard. 381 souls accounted for. 0 friendly KIA during extraction. We owe you our lives." Sarah felt a wave of emotion that threatened to overwhelm her professional composure. She had done it. She had saved them all, using her father's techniques, possibly against the same enemy that had taken him from her. "Copy that, Trident. Get those men home." As the final helicopter lifted off and accelerated away from Devil's Throat, Sarah took stock of her situation. The F-15E was critically damaged. Fuel levels would not support a return to base. Multiple systems were failing. The only question was whether to eject now or attempt to nurse the dying aircraft as far from hostile territory as possible. The radio crackled with Colonel Thompson's voice. "Lightning, this is Iron. What's your status?" "Aircraft critically damaged," Sarah reported with clinical detachment. "Single engine at minimal power. Fuel critical. Multiple systems failing." A pause, then, "Can you make it to the emergency strip at Outpost Delta? It's 30 miles northwest of your position." Sarah checked her navigation system, which flickered unreliably. Outpost Delta was a remote emergency landing strip established for precisely this type of situation. It offered a chance, however slim. "I'll try," she responded simply. Turning the wounded F-15E northwest, Sarah focused all her remaining energy and skill on keeping the aircraft in the air. The stick shuddered in her hand, the aircraft's responses becoming more sluggish with each passing minute. Warning indicators competed for her attention across the instrument panel. Some she could address with emergency procedures. Others she could only acknowledge and work around. As she fought to keep the dying aircraft aloft, Sarah found her thoughts turning to her father. He would have been proud today, not just of her flying, but of her choice to put others before herself, to risk everything for the mission, for the men on the ground who depended on her. "This is how you died, isn't it, Dad?" she whispered to the empty cockpit. "Choosing the mission over yourself." The realization brought not grief, but a sense of connection and understanding she had sought for 5 years. Whatever had happened on her father's final mission, she now felt certain of one thing. He had acted with the same courage and commitment she had shown today. The landing strip at Outpost Delta appeared on the horizon, a single line carved into the desert floor. Sarah began her approach, knowing she would have only one chance. With damaged hydraulics, failing electronics, and minimal power, this would be the most challenging landing of her career. Lightning, this is Delta Approach. We see you on visual. Fire truck standing by. Wind calm, ceiling unlimited, you're cleared to land. Copy, Delta, Sarah acknowledged. Be advised, aircraft severely damaged. Anticipate rough landing. Sarah focused entirely on the mechanics of landing. Airspeed, angle of attack, rate of descent. Each element required constant adjustment as the damaged aircraft fought her inputs. The runway grew larger in her canopy as altitude decreased. 500 feet, 300, 100. At 50 feet, the left hydraulic system failed completely. The aircraft rolled suddenly right, threatening to flip over entirely. Sarah countered with every ounce of skill and strength she possessed, forcing the wings level just as the wheels touched down. The landing was hard but controlled. The F-15E bounced once, settled, and began its rollout down the runway. Sarah applied careful braking, nursing the damaged systems through this final challenge. When the aircraft finally came to rest, emergency vehicles already racing toward her, Sarah allowed herself to exhale fully for the first time since taking off. She had done it, against orders, against protocol, against seemingly impossible odds. 381 Americans were alive because she had trusted her father's teachings and her own abilities. As she began the shutdown procedure for the damaged aircraft, Sarah noticed something she had missed in the chaos of combat. A small photograph had worked its way out from where she kept it tucked in her flight suit pocket. It showed her father standing beside his F-15E, smiling broadly, one hand resting on the aircraft's nose. Sarah touched the photograph gently. "Mission accomplished, Dad," she whispered. Everyone came home. The canopy opened to the harsh desert air and the sound of approaching vehicles. Sarah knew that consequences awaited her back at Luke Air Force Base. She had violated direct orders, taken an aircraft without authorization, engaged in combat operations outside protocol. Court-martial was not just possible, but likely. Yet as she climbed down from the cockpit, legs shaky from adrenaline crash and G-force stress, Sarah felt no regret. Whatever came next, she had honored her father's memory and saved hundreds of lives. Some prices were worth paying. A jeep skidded to a stop nearby, and Colonel Michael Thompson himself climbed out. His face was unreadable as he approached. Sarah stood at attention, prepared for whatever reprimand was coming. Instead, Thompson stopped a pace away, looked her up and down, and then did something entirely unexpected. He saluted. "Your father would be proud, Major," he said quietly. "I know I am." Sarah returned the salute, emotion threatening to break through her professional facade. "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me yet," Thompson warned, though his tone remained surprisingly gentle. "There's still a reckoning coming. You broke every rule in the book today." "Yes, sir, I did. And saved 381 lives in the process." Thompson shook his head slowly. "Come on. Medical needs to check you out, and then we need to talk about your father's techniques, about how you knew them so well, and about Diego Cordero." Sarah felt a jolt of surprise at the mention of Cordero's name. "Sir?" "Later," Thompson said firmly. "First, let's make sure you're not about to collapse from G-force exposure. You pulled maneuvers today that should have rendered you unconscious several times over." As they walked toward the waiting medical team, Sarah glanced back at her damaged F-15E. Despite its battered condition, it stood proud against the desert backdrop, a testament to American engineering and the human will to overcome seemingly impossible odds. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Sarah knew one thing with certainty. Her father's legacy lived on, not just in her, but in the hundreds of lives saved by his innovative thinking. The techniques deemed too risky, too theoretical by conventional wisdom, had proven their worth in the crucible of combat. And somewhere in Devil's Throat Valley, among the wreckage of his organization, Diego Cordero had learned a painful lesson about underestimating American resolve. The same lesson that had perhaps been her father's final message 5 years ago. No one gets left behind. The medical bay at Outpost Delta hummed with quiet efficiency. Sarah Brennan sat on the examination table, still in her flight suit, as the doctor checked her vital signs and examined her for G-force-related injuries. Her body ached in ways that went beyond normal post-flight fatigue. The extreme maneuvers she had executed had pushed both aircraft and pilot beyond design tolerances. Blood pressure elevated but stabilizing, heart rate returning to normal parameters, the doctor reported, making notes on his tablet. Any vision disturbances during the engagement, gray out, blackout, red out? Momentary gray out during the Western Ridge approach, Sarah admitted. Complete blackout for approximately 2 seconds during the vertical climb. The doctor paused, looking up from his tablet with clinical concern. 2 seconds of unconsciousness at that speed and altitude should have been catastrophic. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. The F-15E is remarkably forgiving. The aircraft may be. Physics isn't. The doctor shone a penlight into her eyes, checking pupil response. You're exhibiting mild symptoms of cerebral hypoxia and GLOC after effects. Normally, I'd ground you for at least 72 hours. That won't be necessary, Colonel Thompson said from the doorway. Major Brennan won't be flying again until a full investigation is completed. Sarah met his gaze without flinching. The investigation was inevitable. She had violated direct orders, commandeered an aircraft, and engaged in unauthorized combat operations. Court-martial proceedings were the standard response to such actions. Yet Thompson's expression held something beyond the stern disapproval she expected. "Doctor, give us the room, please," Thompson said. The physician nodded, turning to Sarah before leaving. "Rest. Hydrate. Your body just survived stresses that would incapacitate most pilots. Don't push it further today." When they were alone, Thompson closed the door and took the seat opposite Sarah. For a long moment, neither spoke. Sarah waited, back straight, prepared for the official reprimand that must come. Instead, Thompson reached into his pocket and removed a small flash drive, turning it over in his hands as if weighing its significance. "5 years ago," he began, his voice low and careful, "your father came to me with a theory about close air support in extreme terrain environments. He had developed mathematical models that suggested our standard protocols were unnecessarily restrictive in specific topographical situations." Sarah's pulse quickened. This was not the conversation she had expected. "I told him it was too theoretical, too dangerous to implement without extensive testing." Thompson's fingers tightened around the flash drive. "1 week later, he was dead. And today, you perform maneuvers based on those exact models, saving hundreds of lives in the process." "My father gave me his research before he died," Sarah said. "I've been practicing his techniques in simulation for years. Without authorization, using classified simulator profiles you shouldn't have had access to." Sarah did not deny it. "Yes, sir." Thompson's expression softened unexpectedly. "Robert always said you were the better pilot, sharper instincts, stronger analytical skills." He extended his hand, offering the flash drive. "This contains the complete after-action report from your father's final mission, the unredacted version." Sarah stared at the small device, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. For 5 years, she had pieced together fragments of information, building an incomplete picture of her father's last flight. Now, the full truth lay within reach. "That's classified material, sir," she said, not moving to take it. "It is, and you have clearance. You always did." Thompson placed the drive on the examination table between them. "What you didn't have was a commanding officer willing to give it to you. I was wrong about that. Wrong about a lot of things." Sarah picked up the drive, holding it carefully as if it might dissolve in her hands. "Why now?" "Because today you proved that Robert's theories work. And because the man you engaged today, Diego Cordero, was directly responsible for your father's death." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She had suspected a connection, had seen Cordero's name in redacted documents, but confirmation sent a surge of emotion through her that threatened her carefully maintained composure. "Cordero was CIA," Thompson continued, "Special Activities Division. He went rogue 3 years ago, taking sensitive intelligence and operational techniques with him. Before that, he worked border operations, including the mission your father supported 5 years ago." "The official report said mechanical failure," Sarah said, her voice tightening. "In difficult terrain." "The official report was sanitized. The truth is more complicated." Thompson stood, moving to the small window that overlooked the airfield where Sarah's damaged F-15E stood, surrounded by maintenance crew. "Your father identified Cordero as a security risk during that operation. He observed irregular patterns in Cordero's tactical movements that suggested coordination with elements we were supposed to be tracking. When he reported his concerns, Cordero arranged an ambush. Sarah felt a cold certainty settle in her chest. The patterns she had observed in the valley, the ones that reminded her of her father's final mission, they hadn't been coincidental. They had been Cordero's tactical signature. He used SAM sites positioned in a configuration that matched your father's predicted approach vector, sites that shouldn't have been there based on our intelligence. He knew Dad's techniques, Sarah said, the pieces falling into place. He knew how to counter them. Thompson nodded grimly. Your father evaded the initial salvo but took critical damage. He stayed airborne long enough to relay his findings and Cordero's position before the aircraft became uncontrollable. And today I use those same techniques against Cordero himself, Sarah said, the irony not lost on her. Why wasn't I told any of this? Classification, compartmentalization, politics. Thompson turned back to her. And my promise to your father to keep you safe, to keep you away from Cordero and the border operations that killed him. Sarah absorbed this in silence, turning the flash drive over in her fingers. So many questions answered, yet so many more forming. Is Cordero dead? Did I get him? Satellite confirmation is still pending. Your strike on his position was precise, but he's survived seemingly fatal situations before. The medical bay door opened, interrupting them. A young communications officer stood in the doorway, his expression urgent. Sir, General Warner is on Secure Channel 1. The Pentagon is on Channel 2. They're both asking for immediate updates on Major Brennan and the border situation. Thompson checked his watch. Tell them I'll brief in 15 minutes, and inform General Warner that I'm bringing Major Brennan back to base under my personal authority. The officer nodded and departed. Thompson turned back to Sarah. The next 48 hours will be challenging. You'll face questions from military intelligence, the Pentagon, and possibly the CIA regarding today's events. They'll want to know how you knew about Cordero, how you accessed classified tactical data, and why you disobeyed direct orders. I understand, sir. Answer truthfully, but remember that some in authority may be more concerned with protocol violations than with the lives you saved. Thompson's voice hardened slightly. I'll run interference where I can, but ultimately, you'll face consequences for your actions today. Sarah tucked the flash drive into her flight suit pocket. Whatever those consequences might be, she had achieved what mattered most. 381 Americans alive, her father's techniques validated, and perhaps justice for his death. I'm ready, sir. Thompson nodded, a hint of pride visible beneath his professional demeanor. I believe you are. We'll depart for Luke in 30 minutes. As Thompson left, Sarah remained seated on the examination table, feeling the weight of the small flash drive against her chest. 5 years of questions, 5 years of training in secret, 5 years of carrying her father's legacy alone. Today had changed everything, yet resolved nothing. Cordero might still be alive. The full truth of her father's death remained encrypted on a piece of silicon in her pocket, and her own career hung in the balance. The price of saving hundreds potentially being the end of her time as a pilot. The irony was not lost on her. Like father, like daughter, both willing to sacrifice everything for what they believed was right. The flight back to Luke Air Force Base took place in a specially dispatched C-21 Learjet, rather than the transport helicopter Sarah had expected. The small executive aircraft suggested urgency beyond normal procedures. Thompson spent most of the flight on secure communications, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts and the unopened flash drive burning a hole in her pocket. The Arizona desert passed beneath them, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the rugged landscape. Somewhere out there, Devil's Throat Valley was returning to its usual quiet, though forever changed by the events of the day. Sarah wondered how many border ghosts had survived, whether their organization had been crippled or merely wounded, whether Cordero himself had escaped again. The Learjet touched down at Luke precisely 47 minutes after departure. As the aircraft taxied to a stop, Sarah saw the welcoming committee through the window. General Warner stood on the tarmac alongside a woman in civilian clothing, whose bearing screamed intelligence community. Behind them waited a full security detail. Ready? Thompson asked, standing from his seat as the engine spooled down. Yes, sir. The cabin door opened, stairs extended, and Sarah descended into the hot Arizona afternoon. She stood at attention before General Warner, saluting crisply despite her exhaustion. Major Brennan, Warner acknowledged, returning the salute with formality that revealed nothing of his thoughts. You've created quite the situation. Yes, sir. This is Special Advisor Margaret Sterling. Warner indicated the civilian woman. She has some questions for you regarding today's operation. Sterling studied Sarah with calculating eyes that missed nothing. Major Brennan, your actions today have implications beyond military protocol. I'd like to understand your decision-making process and information sources. I'm prepared to provide a full accounting, ma'am. Good, we'll begin immediately. Sterling gestured toward a waiting vehicle. General Warner has arranged a secure debriefing facility. As they moved toward the vehicle, Sarah noticed activity around the hangar area. The remaining F-15Es were being armed and fueled with urgent efficiency. Something was happening beyond her own situation. Sir, she addressed Warner quietly, are we expecting further engagement in the border region? Warner exchanged a glance with Thompson before answering. The border ghosts are on the move. Your strikes disrupted their operations, but stirred the hornet's nest. Intelligence indicates they're regrouping for potential retaliation. Sarah absorbed this information with growing concern. The rescue mission had succeeded, but the broader threat remained, perhaps had even intensified. The debriefing took place in a windowless room deep within the secure area of the base. For 3 hours, Sarah answered questions from Sterling and a rotating cast of military intelligence officers. She explained her knowledge of her father's techniques, her unauthorized simulator training, and her decision to disobey orders. She revealed her suspicions about Cordero's connection to her father's death, carefully avoiding mention of Thompson's flash drive or his confirmation of those suspicions. Throughout the interrogation, Sterling remained focused on one particular aspect: how Sarah had identified Diego Cordero during the engagement. You stated that you visually confirmed Cordero in a vehicle during the extraction phase, Sterling pressed. Yet your aircraft was moving at high speed under combat conditions. How could you make positive identification? F-15E targeting systems include high-resolution optical capabilities, Sarah explained. The system flagged the vehicle based on known parameters associated with high-value targets. I confirmed visually. That system requires preloaded biometric data, Sterling countered. Data you shouldn't have had access to. Sarah met her gaze steadily. All border operation aircraft are updated with current biometric packages for known threats in the region. My F-15E received standard updates during pre-flight. The explanation was technically accurate while avoiding the complete truth: that Sarah had specifically searched for and memorized Cordero's biometric profile years ago, during her private investigation into her father's death. As the questioning continued, Sarah sensed a shift in the room's atmosphere. The interrogators seemed less interested in her protocol violations and more concerned with operational details of the border ghosts. Questions about ammunition types, vehicle configurations, and communication patterns suggested they were compiling tactical intelligence rather than building a case against her. Finally, after what felt like days, Warner called a halt to the proceedings. We have sufficient information for preliminary assessment, he announced. Major Brennan, you're confined to base pending further review. Your flight status remains suspended. Yes, sir. Colonel Thompson will escort you to temporary quarters. We'll reconvene at 800 tomorrow. As they left the debriefing room, Sarah noticed the base had shifted to elevated alert status. Additional security personnel patrolled the perimeter, and the operations tempo had increased dramatically. Thompson led her toward the officers' quarters area, his expression grim. What's happening, sir? She asked when they were alone. The situation has escalated, he replied, keeping his voice low. Satellite imagery confirms that your strike damaged Cordero's position but didn't eliminate him. Now he's mobilizing every asset he has along the border. Intelligence suggests a major operation within the next 24 to 48 hours. What kind of operation? Unknown, but given the weapons caches identified in Devil's Throat, potentially devastating. Thompson stopped outside a door marked with a temporary access card. These are your quarters for now. You're restricted from operational areas but have access to the mess and fitness facilities. Sarah accepted the access card, her mind racing with implications. Sir, if Cordero is planning something significant, you'll need every pilot available. That's not my call to make. For now, your role is to rest and continue cooperating with the investigation. As Thompson turned to leave, Sarah asked the question that had burned in her mind throughout the debriefing. Sir, the SEALs we extracted, have they provided any intelligence on what they found in Devil's Throat? Thompson hesitated. They recovered documents indicating a broader conspiracy than we initially understood. The border ghosts aren't just a paramilitary organization. They're a well-funded proxy for interests that may include elements within our own government. Like the ones who covered up my father's murder, Sarah said, the pieces connecting in her mind. Possibly. Get some rest, Major. Tomorrow will be another long day. Alone in her temporary quarters, Sarah finally removed the flash drive from her pocket. The small device contained answers she had sought for 5 years, yet she hesitated to access it. Once she knew the full truth of her father's death, there would be no going back. No maintaining the protective uncertainty that had allowed her to function professionally all these years. She inserted the drive into her secure tablet and began reading. The unredacted report laid bare the operation that had claimed her father's life with clinical precision. Colonel Robert Brennan had been providing close air support for a classified border security operation targeting a suspected weapons smuggling network. During the mission, he had observed tactical anomalies that suggested insider coordination. Against protocol but following his instincts, he had maintained surveillance on CIA operative Diego Cordero, rather than returning to base when his primary mission was completed. What he discovered was documented in his final transmission. Cordero meeting with the very smugglers they were supposed to be tracking, exchanging intelligence for what appeared to be financial compensation. Brennan had recorded the meeting and was transmitting the data when his F-15E was struck by surface-to-air missiles from positions that hadn't appeared in any intelligence briefing. Positions that Cordero had apparently established as insurance against exactly this type of discovery. The report confirmed what Thompson had told her, but with additional details that sent a chill through her body. Before his aircraft became uncontrollable, Robert Brennan had managed to transmit one final piece of information. References to the Committee, an unnamed group within the government that was apparently directing Cordero's activities for purposes unknown. This revelation had triggered an immediate classification of the entire incident at the highest levels. Robert Brennan's death was officially recorded as a mechanical failure. The evidence he had gathered was sequestered. The investigation was shut down before it began. Sarah set the tablet down, her hands trembling slightly. Her father hadn't just been killed. He had been silenced, and the people responsible remained in positions of power, possibly including some of the very officials now investigating her actions in Devil's Throat. She thought of Special Advisor Sterling and her pointed questions about Cordero. Was she part of the cover-up? Or was she genuinely pursuing threats to national security? Sarah had no way to know who to trust beyond Thompson, and even his motivations remained partially obscured. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Sarah quickly secured the tablet and moved to answer. A young airman stood outside looking slightly nervous. "Major Brennan, I have a secure communication for you. From Trident Actual." Sarah accepted the encrypted phone with surprise. Lieutenant Commander James Parker, the SEAL team leader she had extracted, was reaching out directly. She closed the door and activated the device. "This is Brennan." "Major." Parker's voice was clear despite the encryption. "I'm breaking protocol to make this call, but you broke a few rules yourself today, so I figured you'd understand." "What can I do for you, Commander?" "You already did it. 381 of us are alive because of you." Parker paused. "But that's not why I'm calling. I understand you're under investigation regarding today's operation." "That's correct." "Then you should know what we found in Devil's Throat. Intelligence that explains why we were ambushed so effectively." Sarah's pulse quickened. "I'm listening." "The Border Ghosts had complete operational details of our mission before we ever crossed into the valley. Radio frequencies, approach vectors, equipment loadouts, everything." Parker's voice hardened. "That information could only have come from secured briefing materials at the Pentagon level." "You're suggesting a leak within high command," Sarah said carefully, mindful that even encrypted communications weren't necessarily secure. "I'm suggesting the same thing your father discovered 5 years ago. A coordinated effort to destabilize border security for political and financial gain." Parker lowered his voice further. "We recovered documentation linking Cordero to funding sources within defense appropriations, black budget allocations. Money that disappeared from counterterrorism operations and reappeared in Border Ghost accounts." Sarah thought of the committee mentioned in her father's final transmission. "Did you identify specific individuals?" "Partial names, redacted sections, but enough to establish patterns. We're analyzing it now, but there's resistance from above, pressure to classify everything and move on, just as there had been after her father's death." history repeating itself with methodical precision. Why tell me this? Sarah asked. Because your father tried to expose this 5 years ago and paid with his life. Because you nearly did the same today. And because I think you're still in danger. The warning sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. What kind of danger? The kind that comes from knowing too much about people with significant resources and zero accountability. Watch your back, Major. Not everyone celebrating the rescue of those SEALs is happy about what we found in that valley. The call ended abruptly, leaving Sarah staring at the silent device. Parker's warning confirmed her worst fears. The conspiracy that had killed her father remained active. Her actions today had once again threatened their operations, and now she was confined to base, cut off from operational channels, effectively isolated. She moved to the window, looking out at the darkening sky above Luke Air Force Base. The flight line hummed with activity as aircraft were prepared for potential deployment against whatever Cordero was planning. Aircraft she should be helping to prepare, to fly, to fight. Instead, she was grounded, sidelined by the very protocols that had failed 381 men earlier today. Protocols that may have been deliberately designed to fail by the same forces that had arranged her father's death. Sarah returned to the tablet, reviewing the information on the flash drive once more, searching for connections she might have missed. Names, dates, locations, anything that might help her understand the full scope of what she was facing. A notification appeared on her secure base account. New orders effective immediately. She opened the message, expecting further restrictions. Instead, she found herself temporarily assigned to a classified intelligence assessment team focused on the border ghost situation. Her presence was requested in Briefing Room Alpha at 2100 hours, less than an hour from now. The message was authenticated with General Warner's credentials, but included a personal note from Thompson. Your perspective is needed. Proceed with caution. Sarah closed the tablet, considering the implications. Either her specialized knowledge of the border situation was genuinely required, or someone was creating an opportunity to contain a potential security breach. Her. Either way, she had little choice but to comply. She showered and changed into a fresh flight suit, the only uniform she had available in her temporary quarters. As she prepared to leave, she secured the flash drive in a concealed pocket, unwilling to leave the evidence of her father's discovery unprotected. The walk to Briefing Room Alpha took her through sections of the base now humming with the focused energy of pre-deployment preparations. Additional security personnel were visible at key junctions. The base was transitioning to war footing, though no official declaration had been made. Sarah arrived at the briefing room precisely at 2100. The guard checked her identification and waved her through with a respect that suggested word of her actions had spread throughout the base. Inside, she found a scene very different from what she had expected. Rather than the small intelligence team mentioned in her orders, the room contained a full operational planning group. General Warner stood at the head of the table, surrounded by squadron commanders, intelligence officers, and senior NCOs. Colonel Thompson sat to his right, and to Warner's left, surprisingly, stood Special Advisor Sterling. All eyes turned to Sarah as she entered. She came to attention, uncertain of her role in this gathering. Major Brennan, Warner acknowledged. Join us. Sarah moved to the indicated seat, noting the satellite imagery displayed on the main screen. Devil's Throat Valley, with multiple heat signatures indicating significant movement. The border ghosts were indeed mobilizing. As you've probably guessed, Warner began, the situation has evolved beyond a simple extraction operation. Intelligence now indicates the border ghosts are preparing for a coordinated attack on multiple targets within U.S. territory. Targets that include critical infrastructure and potentially civilian populations. The room remained silent as Warner continued, bringing up additional imagery on the screens. Satellite confirmation shows 8 separate groups moving toward crossing points along a 200-mile stretch of border. Each group is heavily armed and appears to be transporting specialized equipment consistent with the weapons caches identified in Devil's Throat. Chemical or biological? Asked one of the squadron commanders. Possibly both, Sterling interjected. Analysis of samples recovered by the SEAL team indicates refined VX nerve agent components and weaponized anthrax. If successfully deployed against population centers, casualties could exceed 10,000 within the first hour. The room absorbed this information with professional gravity. Sarah studied the satellite imagery, recognizing the tactical pattern emerging. The border ghosts were spreading their forces to divide any response, creating multiple simultaneous threats that would strain defensive resources. Our response plan is as follows, Warner continued. F-16 squadrons will establish air superiority and containment along the border region. Army helicopter units from Fort Huachuca will deploy to intercept ground forces. Marine Corps rapid response teams are inbound from Camp Pendleton to secure potential target sites. It was a textbook response to a multi-vector threat, but Sarah saw the flaw immediately, the same flaw that had nearly cost 381 lives earlier today. Sir, she said, unable to remain silent. The border ghosts are counting on exactly that response. They're creating a dispersal pattern specifically designed to stretch our air assets across too wide an area. Warner regarded her with carefully neutral expression. Explain, Major. Sarah stood and moved to the main display, indicating the movement patterns. These 8 groups are decoys. They're too visible, too obvious in their movements. They want us to track them, to commit our forces against them. She pointed to a sector that showed minimal activity. The real threat will come through here. Devil's Canyon, 20 miles east of Devil's Throat. It's what my father would call a shadow corridor terrain feature that creates radar blindness under specific atmospheric conditions. The intelligence officer nearest her checked his data. We show no significant movement in that sector. Because they're using terrain masking, Sarah explained, the same technique I used today to avoid their SAM sites. They're moving under the radar ceiling, following the canyon contours. Standard surveillance won't detect them. Sterling leaned forward, her expression shifting from skepticism to interest. What makes you so certain of this assessment, Major? Because it's what I would do if I were planning this operation. And because it's consistent with Cordero's tactical pattern. Sarah highlighted additional terrain features on the map. These ridgelines provide perfect cover for a mechanized column moving north. The canyon opens into a valley that offers direct access to 3 major population centers within 50 miles, all with minimal defensive infrastructure. The room fell silent as the implications became clear. If Sarah was right, they were preparing to counter a threat that was largely diversionary, while the real danger moved undetected toward civilian targets. Warner studied the map for a long moment before turning to his intelligence team. Redirect surveillance assets to verify Brennan's theory. I want high-resolution coverage of Devil's Canyon immediately. As the officers moved to comply, Thompson caught Sarah's eye, giving her a subtle nod of approval. She had spoken up despite her precarious position, potentially risking further disciplinary action to ensure the correct tactical assessment. 20 minutes later, the room's atmosphere had transformed. Enhanced satellite imagery confirmed Sarah's prediction. A substantial mechanized column moving through Devil's Canyon, completely invisible to standard surveillance due to their expert use of terrain features. Thermal imaging revealed approximately 200 personnel with multiple transport vehicles that could be carrying the chemical and biological agents recovered from Devil's Throat. Revised threat assessment places their arrival at the canyon mouth in approximately 4 hours, the intelligence officer reported. From there, they would have access to roadways leading to Phoenix, Tucson, and multiple smaller communities. Warner's expression hardened as he absorbed the implications. We need to neutralize this threat before they exit the canyon. Once they reach open ground and disperse, the risk to civilian populations increases exponentially. Airstrike options are limited by the same terrain features that hide them from surveillance, the air operations officer noted. Standard attack profiles would be ineffective due to the canyon walls and potential for surface-to-air defenses. What about drone strikes? Sterling suggested. Too slow to deploy in sufficient numbers. We'd hit some of them, but not enough to neutralize the threat completely. Sarah listened to the tactical discussion, recognizing the same problem that had faced the SEALs in Devil's Throat. Conventional air support doctrine simply wasn't designed for the unique challenges presented by this terrain. Sir, she said, drawing Warner's attention, I believe I can provide the necessary air support to neutralize this threat. The room fell silent. After her actions earlier today, Sarah's suggestion carried both credibility and controversy. You're grounded, Major, Warner reminded her, and the F-15E you were flying is severely damaged. There are 3 additional F-15Es on the flight line, fully armed and fueled, Sarah responded. And with respect, sir, I'm the only pilot on this base with proven experience engaging targets in canyon terrain under these specific conditions. Warner studied her for a long moment, weighing professional necessity against military protocol. Lives against regulations. The same calculation Sarah had made hours earlier when she took off without authorization. Your previous engagement was unauthorized and resulted in significant aircraft damage, he said carefully. Yes, sir. It also resulted in 381 Americans coming home alive. Thompson leaned toward Warner, speaking quietly but audibly enough for Sarah to hear. She's right, David. No one else has the experience with these techniques, not even me. Warner's gaze moved from Sarah to the satellite imagery showing the border ghost column advancing steadily through the canyon, then to the population centers that lay in their path. Thousands of American lives potentially hanging in the balance. Special Advisor Sterling, he said finally. Your assessment? Sterling had been watching the exchange with calculating eyes. The threat is verified and time-sensitive. Conventional response has limited effectiveness. Major Brennan has demonstrated capabilities specifically suited to this scenario. She paused. I recommend field authorization for operational necessity. It was the legal framework Warner needed. A special exemption to standard protocol under emergency conditions. Very well, he decided. Major Brennan, you are temporarily restored to flight status for this specific mission. Colonel Thompson will serve as your mission commander. Full weapons authorization against confirmed hostile forces in the Devil's Canyon sector. Thank you, sir, Sarah responded, maintaining professional composure despite the surge of adrenaline that accompanied the decision. Let me be absolutely clear, Warner continued. This is a surgical strike against a specific verified threat to American civilians. You will eliminate the border ghost column in Devil's Canyon and return directly to base. Any deviation from that mission profile will result in immediate grounding and potential court-martial. Is that understood? Perfectly, sir. Warner nodded to Thompson. Colonel, prepare the mission briefing. Wheels up in 30 minutes. As the room transformed into a pre-mission planning center, Sarah felt the weight of what lay ahead. Once again, she would fly into terrain that defied conventional tactics. Once again, she would face the forces connected to her father's death. But this time, she did so with full authorization, her unique skills recognized and deployed officially, rather than in defiance of command. Thompson joined her at the tactical display, his expression a mixture of concern and determination. You know what you're getting into, Brennan. Cordero will have anticipated potential airstrikes. He'll have air defenses in place. I know, sir. Your father's techniques work. You proved that today. But they're not magic. They're calculated risk based on physics and probability. Sarah nodded, studying the canyon topography. I'll need the newest Strike Eagle, the one with the enhanced targeting system and additional countermeasure capacity. Already being prepped? Thompson lowered his voice. There's something else you should know. Analysis of the SEAL team's intelligence indicates Cordero has a personal stake in this operation. This isn't just about weapons or money anymore. What do you mean? The documents they recovered included communications suggesting Cordero harbors a specific grudge against the Brennan family. Your father exposed him 5 years ago. You damaged his operation today. Intelligence assessment suggests he may have adjusted his plan specifically to draw you into engagement. Sarah absorbed this with a chill that ran deeper than tactical concern. He wants me in that canyon. It's a possibility we have to consider, which means you need to be prepared for countermeasures specifically designed against your father's techniques. The trap was obvious now. The entire operation might have been orchestrated to draw her specifically into combat, to finish what Cordero had started with her father. Yet the threat to civilian populations remained real. Thousands of lives against the risk to her own. The same choice her father had faced 5 years ago. I understand the risk, sir, she said simply. Thompson studied her for a moment, then nodded. Mission briefing in 5 minutes, pre-flight in 15. As the colonel moved away to coordinate with the other officers, Sarah remained at the tactical display, memorizing every contour of Devil's Canyon, the terrain that might become either her greatest ally or her final resting place. Special Advisor Sterling appeared beside her, watching the same display with analytical precision. Your father was a good man, Major, she said without preamble. One of the few who recognized the threat that Cordero represented before it metastasized. Sarah turned to her, surprised by the personal assessment. You knew him? I worked adjacent to his operations. Different agency, similar concerns. Sterling kept her eyes on the display. There are people in Washington who remember Robert Brennan's final transmission. People who have been building a case against certain elements within our government for 5 years. The committee, Sarah said, testing Sterling's reaction. The advisor's expression remained neutral, but her eyes sharpened with interest. You've done your homework. My father died trying to expose them. I owe it to him to understand why. Then understand this. The operation you're about to undertake isn't just about stopping a terrorist attack. It's about proving that Cordero and his supporters can be beaten, that their influence isn't as absolute as they believe. Sarah studied Sterling with new awareness. You're not just here to investigate me. I'm here because certain interested parties recognized your name when the Devil's Throat situation developed. The same interests that have been monitoring Cordero's activities since your father's death. Sterling finally turned to meet Sarah's gaze directly. Complete this mission successfully, and you'll have allies you didn't know existed. Before Sarah could respond, Thompson called the room to order for the mission briefing. But as she took her seat, Sarah's mind raced with implications. The conspiracy her father had discovered ran deeper than she had imagined, extending into multiple agencies and power centers. Yet within that corrupt system, there remained individuals working to expose the truth. Individuals now watching her with particular interest. The mission briefing was concise and focused. Sarah would fly a single F-15E Strike Eagle into Devil's Canyon with the objective of neutralizing the border ghost column before it could exit into open terrain. Two F-16S would provide high cover, but would remain outside the canyon itself due to the limitations of their aircraft in the confined space. A rescue helicopter would be on standby at a forward position in case of emergency. Intelligence projected that the border ghost column would reach the canyon mouth in 3 hours and 40 minutes. Sarah's flight time to intercept was approximately 35 minutes, giving her a limited window to neutralize the threat before it approached civilian areas. Satellite imagery shows the column is well armed and likely prepared for air attack, the intelligence officer explained. Expect multiple anti-aircraft positions, potentially including man-portable air defense systems similar to those encountered in Devil's Throat. What about civilian presence in the target area? Sarah asked. Negative. Devil's Canyon runs through restricted federal land. No civilian access within 20 miles of the projected engagement zone. That simplified the rules of engagement. Any personnel in the canyon could be presumed hostile. Weapons loadout is configured for maximum precision with secondary area effect capacity. The armament officer reported, 2 AM-9X Sidewinders for self-defense, 6 500-pound JDAMs with precision guidance and full cannon ammunition. Sarah nodded her approval. The loadout would give her flexibility to engage both point targets and grouped enemy personnel. The JDAMs, in particular, would be effective in the canyon environment, their guidance systems allowing for precision even in the complex terrain. Weather conditions are optimal, the meteorologist added. Clear skies, minimal wind. Canyon thermals are within normal parameters. No dust storms or other atmospheric anomalies projected within the mission timeframe. As the briefing concluded, Warner addressed the room one final time. This operation represents our only realistic chance to neutralize this threat before it reaches civilian areas. The border ghosts have demonstrated both the capability and intent to conduct mass casualty attacks on American soil. Your mission is to ensure they never get that opportunity. He turned to Sarah. Questions, Major Brennan? No, sir. Mission parameters are clear. Then proceed to pre-flight. Good hunting. Sarah left the briefing room and headed directly to the flight line, where her assigned F-15E was being prepared, the newest Strike Eagle in the squadron. Tail number 91-0334 stood ready under the harsh lights. Ground crew swarmed around it, completing final checks and armament procedures. The crew chief, Master Sergeant Davis, met her at the aircraft. She's ready, ma'am. Full combat loadout, all systems green, fuel topped off. Sarah nodded her appreciation, beginning her own visual inspection of the aircraft. Any issues I should be aware of? None, ma'am. This bird just came back from depot maintenance last week. She's the cleanest Strike Eagle on the base. Sarah continued her inspection with methodical precision, checking control surfaces, engine intakes, weapons pylons, and countless other details that could mean the difference between success and failure, between life and death. Her father had taught her never to rush pre-flight, no matter how urgent the mission. The few minutes spent on thorough inspection could save precious seconds in combat when systems performed exactly as expected. Colonel Thompson approached as she completed her external checks. Mission update. Satellite confirms the column continues to advance through the canyon. No change in composition or speed. Estimated time to canyon mouth, now 3 hours 20 minutes. That gives me plenty of time to reach them well before they approach open terrain, Sarah noted. Intelligence has identified 3 likely air defense positions within the column, Thompson continued, showing her updated imagery on a secure tablet. 2 at the front of the formation, 1 in the rear. Classic convoy protection configuration. Sarah studied the images, noting the positioning relative to the canyon walls. They're using the terrain to maximize coverage angles while minimizing exposure. Smart. They've had years to study these canyons, probably ran dozens of simulated engagements. Thompson's expression grew more serious. This won't be like Devil's Throat, Brennan. There, they were focused on the SEALs. Here, they'll be expecting air attack, preparing for it. I understand, sir. Thompson placed a hand on her shoulder, the gesture uncharacteristically personal. Robert would be proud of what you did today, what you're about to do. But he'd also want you to come back. He handed her a small object. He gave me this before his last mission. Said if anything happened to him, I should hold on to it until you were ready. Sarah looked down at a small silver compass, worn smooth from years of handling. Her father's lucky compass, the one he had carried since flight school. The one she had assumed was lost with him 5 years ago. He knew the risks he was taking, Thompson said quietly. Just like you do now. Use his techniques, but remember, they're tools, not guarantees. The best pilot is the one who comes home to fly another day. Sarah closed her fingers around the compass, feeling its weight in history. Thank you, sir. Thompson stepped back, resuming his professional demeanor. I'll be monitoring from command. Regular communication checks on the designated frequency. Any sign that the mission is compromised, you abort immediately. That's an order. Yes, sir. With final checks complete, Sarah climbed into the cockpit, settling into the seat that felt more like home than anywhere else in her world. The pre-flight sequence flowed through her hands with practiced efficiency, each switch and system responding perfectly. The twin engines roared to life beneath her, their vibration traveling through the airframe and into her body. Tower, this is Strike 3-4 requesting clearance for takeoff. Priority mission. Strike 3-4, you are cleared for immediate takeoff on runway 36. Winds calm, sky clear. Sarah taxied into position, advancing the throttles with measured precision. The F-15E accelerated down the runway, gathering speed until she pulled back on the stick at precisely the right moment. The wheels left the ground, and once again, she was in her element. The aircraft climbing rapidly into the night sky, free from the constraints of Earth. Banking toward the southeast, Sarah activated her tactical systems and began reviewing the mission parameters once more. Devil's Canyon lay 40 miles ahead, a jagged scar through the desert landscape. Somewhere in its winding confines, Diego Cordero led a column of terrorists toward American cities, toward innocent civilians who had no idea of the danger approaching, and possibly toward a trap specifically designed for her. Sarah pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on the immediate tactical situation. The F-15E accelerated to cruising speed, the night air smooth around its aerodynamic frame. Behind her, 2 F-16 maintained position at higher altitude, providing overwatch but unable to follow her into the canyon itself. Strike 3-4, this is Watchdog Lead. We have you on tactical, maintaining Angels 25, all clear above. Copy, Watchdog. I appreciate the company. Roger that, we'll keep the porch light on. The desert passed beneath her, moonlight illuminating the rugged landscape in silvery detail. Sarah checked her navigation system. 15 minutes to target area. She activated her advanced targeting systems, allowing the sensors to begin gathering data on the terrain ahead. Strike 3-4, this is Bastion. Colonel Thompson's voice came through clearly on the command frequency. Satellite update shows target continuing on projected course. 3-vehicle column with approximately 200 personnel, air defense positions consistent with previous assessment. Copy, Bastion. Any update on composition of chemical/biological package? Intelligence confirms VX nerve agent components and weaponized anthrax along with conventional explosives. Estimate total casualty potential in excess of 15,000 if deployed in population centers. The number hung in the air between them. 15,000 American lives potentially saved or lost, depending on the success of her mission. Sarah adjusted her course slightly, optimizing her approach vector to the canyon entrance. Strike 3-4, be advised we're detecting increased electronic emissions from the target area, the electronic warfare officer reported. Possible radar activation. They may be expecting company. Understood. Adjusting approach profile. Sarah reduced altitude, bringing the F-15E down to 500 feet above the desert floor. At this height, radar detection became more difficult, particularly against the background clutter of the terrain. She would approach the canyon mouth at minimum altitude before climbing to engagement position. The targeting system chimed softly, indicating acquisition of the canyon entrance. 10 minutes to intercept. Sarah reviewed her attack plan once more. The confined space of the canyon created both challenges and opportunities. Limited maneuvering room balanced against the amplifying effects of the canyon walls on precision munitions. Reduced escape routes counterweighted by predictable target movement patterns. Her father's techniques were designed specifically for these conditions. Approaches that conventional doctrine deemed too dangerous became viable through precise mathematical modeling of terrain effects on both aircraft performance and weapons delivery. 5 minutes to target area, Sarah reported. Beginning approach profile. Copy, strike 3-4, Thompson responded. You are cleared hot, weapons free on confirmed hostile targets. Sarah acknowledged, then focused entirely on the approaching canyon. The terrain rushed beneath her aircraft, moonlight casting sharp shadows across the desert floor. The canyon mouth appeared ahead, a dark gash in the silver landscape. She reduced speed slightly, adjusting her approach angle to minimize radar cross-section. The F-15E responded perfectly to her inputs. The controls an extension of her own body after thousands of hours in the cockpit. This was the moment where her father's teachings diverged most significantly from standard Air Force doctrine. The approach that would bring her not over the canyon, as conventional tactics dictated, but into it. Initiating canyon insertion, she reported, then banked the aircraft into a descending turn that aligned perfectly with the canyon mouth. The F-15E slipped between the canyon walls with less than 50 feet of clearance on either side. Immediately, the tactical environment transformed. Radar signatures became confused by the close rock surfaces. GPS signals weakened. The aircraft's terrain-following systems screamed warnings that Sarah selectively muted, relying instead on visual reference and her memorized map of the canyon. Strike 3-4, we've lost clear tracking, Watchdog Lead reported from above. Canyon walls are blocking consistent radar return. Expected, Sarah responded tersely, her attention focused on navigating the narrow space at over 400 knots. Maintaining visual en route and target area. The canyon walls rose higher on either side as she penetrated deeper, moonlight creating alternating patterns of light and shadow across her path. The F-15E handled beautifully in the confined space, responding to her smallest inputs with precision that would have seemed impossible in an aircraft of its size and speed. 3 minutes of intense flying brought her to a wider section of canyon, where satellite imagery had placed the border ghost column. Sarah reduced speed further, activating passive sensors to locate the targets without revealing her own position. The thermal imaging system highlighted the convoy almost immediately. 3 large trucks surrounded by smaller vehicles and dismounted personnel. They had established defensive positions along their route, including the 3 air defense emplacements identified in the briefing. The column was approximately halfway through the canyon, moving steadily toward the northern exit. Sarah assessed the tactical situation in seconds. The lead vehicle appeared to be a command and control center based on the antenna configuration. The middle transport likely contained the bulk of the personnel, while the rear vehicle showed thermal signatures consistent with the chemical and biological agents identified in intelligence reports. Target acquired, she reported. Beginning engagement sequence. From her current position, partially masked by a bend in the canyon, Sarah had brief moments to act before the border ghost air defenses could effectively target her aircraft. She would have one clean attack run before they responded, then would need to use the canyon terrain for protection during subsequent approaches. The FF-15E's targeting system locked onto the rear transport, the most critical threat given its deadly cargo. Sarah selected 2 JDAMs, programming them for precision strike on the vehicle itself. Weapons release, she announced, pressing the button that sent the guided bombs arcing toward their target. The JDAMs separated cleanly from the aircraft, their guidance systems tracking precisely despite the challenging canyon environment. Sarah immediately banked the F-15E into a tight turn, using a side canyon for cover as she monitored the strike through her tactical display. Twin explosions illuminated the canyon in harsh light as the JDAMs found their mark. The rear transport disappeared in a fireball that suggested secondary explosions from the munitions it had been carrying. Direct hit on primary target, Sarah reported. Secondary explosions consistent with ordnance detonation. Almost immediately, the canyon lit up with anti-aircraft fire from the surviving vehicles. Tracers arced through the night sky, searching for the aircraft that had struck with such devastating effect. Sarah maintained her position in the side canyon, allowing the targeting system to recalibrate based on the new information. The middle transport had stopped, personnel disembarking rapidly and taking defensive positions. The lead vehicle was turning, attempting to establish a better firing position for its mounted weapons. Strike 3-4, satellite confirmed significant damage to rear vehicle, Thompson reported. Chemical/biological package appears neutralized. Multiple secondary heat signatures indicate casualties among escort personnel. The first phase had succeeded. The deadliest threat had been eliminated. Now Sarah needed to neutralize the remaining forces before they could escape the canyon and disperse into the surrounding terrain. She plotted her second attack run, this time targeting the lead vehicle with its command and control capabilities. Disabling it would reduce the border ghost's ability to coordinate their defense and potential escape. Using the terrain for masking, Sarah maneuvered the F-15E through a series of canyon bends, approaching the target from an unexpected angle. The defensive fire continued but remained unfocused, the border ghost unable to locate her precise position among the canyon echoes. Executing second attack run, she reported, bringing the aircraft around a final bend that placed her perfectly for the strike. The lead vehicle appeared in her targeting display, its heat signature bright against the cooler canyon floor. Sarah selected a single JDAM, calculating the precise release point that would account for the vehicle's movement and the surrounding terrain features. Weapons release came at the exact moment her father's equations had predicted. The JDAM separated cleanly, its guidance system locked onto the target. Sarah immediately executed another evasive maneuver, banking hard into a narrow side passage as defensive fire intensified. The explosion echoed through the canyon, confirming another direct hit. On her tactical display, Sarah watched the lead vehicle's heat signature distort and fade, indicating catastrophic damage. "Command vehicle neutralized," she reported, moving to engage remaining targets. As she prepared for her third attack run, a warning tone sounded in her helmet. Missile launch detected. The border ghosts had activated their man-portable air defense systems, transitioning from unguided fire to radar-guided missiles. Sarah deployed countermeasures and executed a series of tight turns within the canyon confines, using the terrain to break missile lock. The F-15E strained against the G-forces, the airframe creaking with the stress of maneuvers it had never been designed to perform in such restricted space. The missile tracking tone faded as her countermeasures and terrain masking took effect. Sarah regained her tactical position, assessing the situation with rapid precision. The remaining transport had begun moving again, attempting to reach the canyon exit. Personnel moved alongside it, maintaining protective formation. Among them, a single figure caught her attention. Thermal imaging showed a person moving with distinct authority, directing others with confident gestures. The targeting system's facial recognition activated, searching its database against the thermal signature. Identification appeared on her display. Diego Cordero, 95% confidence match. The man who had killed her father was directly in her sights. Sarah's finger hovered over the weapons release. One more JDAM would eliminate not just the remaining vehicle, but Cordero himself. Justice for her father, closure for 5 years of questions and pain. Yet something held her back. The voice of her training, the echo of her father's teachings. The mission comes first. Personal feelings have no place in the cockpit. Cordero was moving the surviving personnel toward a position Sarah recognized from her study of the canyon topography. A natural bunker formed by an overhanging rock formation, one that would provide excellent protection against air attack, one that would allow them to establish a defensive position until reinforcements could arrive. She needed to act quickly, but precisely. Not for vengeance, but to complete the mission, to protect the civilians who remained Cordero's ultimate target. Sarah selected her remaining JDAMs, programming them for a pattern strike that would cover the area between the surviving transport and the natural bunker. The precision-guided munitions would saturate the zone where the border ghosts were most concentrated, while minimizing the risk of anyone escaping the engagement area. Executing final attack run, she reported. Multiple targets area effect. The F-15E banked smoothly into position, lining up for the optimal release point. Below, the border ghosts had detected her approach and concentrated their fire in her direction. Tracers streaked past her canopy as she maintained her course with unwavering focus. Weapons release came at precisely the calculated moment. The remaining JDAMs separated from the aircraft in rapid sequence, their guidance systems working in concert to create the coverage pattern Sarah had programmed. Immediately, she executed another evasive maneuver, this time climbing vertically along one canyon wall before rolling into a protected position behind a massive rock outcropping. The maneuver subjected her to crushing G-forces, the specialized flight suit compressing around her legs and abdomen as blood threatened to drain from her brain. Through the momentary gray at the edges of her vision, Sarah watched her tactical display as the JDAMs found their targets. Multiple explosions illuminated the canyon floor, their combined effect creating a devastating engagement zone precisely where she had intended. The transport vehicle disappeared in flame. The personnel moving toward the natural bunker were caught in the open, the precision-guided munitions leaving no path for escape. Strike 3-4, satellite confirms multiple direct hits, Thompson reported, his voice tight with professional restraint. Target area shows significant thermal disruption consistent with complete neutralization. Sarah banked the F-15E into a climbing turn that brought her above the canyon rim, emerging into open sky where her tactical systems could function without interference. The aircraft automatically performed a battle damage assessment, confirming no significant hits or system degradation, despite the intense anti-aircraft fire. Requesting satellite verification of target status, she said, circling above the canyon at a safe altitude. Stand by for confirmation. The pause stretched for nearly a minute as intelligence analysts studied the real-time imagery. Strike 3-4, satellite confirms zero movement in target area. All vehicles destroyed. No surviving heat signatures detected among personnel. Mission objectives achieved. Border ghost column neutralized. Sarah absorbed the information with professional detachment, though beneath her calm exterior, emotions churned. The mission had succeeded. The threat to American civilians had been eliminated. And Diego Cordero, the man responsible for her father's death, had finally faced justice. Yet there was no sense of personal victory. No satisfaction in vengeance achieved. Only the solemn recognition that she had done what was necessary. What her father would have done in her position. Protect the innocent. Complete the mission. Uphold the oath they both had taken. Strike 3-4 returning to base, she reported, banking the F-15E toward Luke Air Force Base. Mission complete. As she flew through the clear desert night, Sarah thought of her father's compass, securely stored in her flight suit pocket. His luck had run out 5 years ago in terrain not unlike what she had just navigated. Yet something of his legacy had survived. His techniques, his ethical code, his unwavering commitment to protecting American lives. That legacy had saved 381 seals in Devil's Throat. It had saved potentially thousands more civilians who would never know how close they had come to disaster tonight. And it had saved Sarah herself, guiding her through situations that conventional wisdom deemed impossible. The radio crackled with General Warner's voice. Strike 3-4, this is Bastion Actual. Exceptional work, Major Brennan. Return to base for immediate debriefing. Copy Bastion Actual. Inbound ETA 20 minutes. The stars stretched endlessly above her as the F-15E sliced through the night air toward home. Whatever consequences awaited her at Luke Air Force Base, whatever investigation might still proceed regarding her unauthorized actions earlier that day, Sarah felt a profound sense of completion, of circle closed. She had faced her father's killer and prevailed not through personal vengeance, but through professional excellence. She had validated his theories and techniques in the crucible of combat, twice in a single day, and she had protected the nation they both had sworn to defend, regardless of personal cost. Robert Brennan's daughter had finished what he started, had fought the same enemy in the same terrain, using the same unconventional approach that had cost him his life. But where he had fallen, she had succeeded. The compass in her pocket seemed to pulse with significance, not luck, but guidance, not superstition, but connection across the years. Father to daughter, mentor to student, one pilot's innovation becoming another's salvation. As Luke Air Force Base appeared on the horizon, its runways outlined in lights against the desert darkness, Sarah touched her father's silver wings pinned to her flight suit. "Mission accomplished, Dad," she whispered to the empty cockpit. "Everyone's coming home." Dawn broke over Luke Air Force Base, painting the desert landscape in hues of gold and amber. Sarah Brennan stood at attention in General Warner's office, her posture perfect despite the exhaustion that weighed on every muscle. 24 hours had passed since she first defied orders to save the trapped SEAL team. In that time, she had flown 2 combat missions, endured punishing G-forces, neutralized Diego Cordero, and prevented a catastrophic attack on American civilians. Now came the reckoning. Warner sat behind his desk, reviewing documents with deliberate focus. Colonel Thompson stood to one side, his expression carefully neutral. Special Advisor Sterling occupied a chair near the window, her attention seemingly on the flight line outside, but clearly attuned to every word spoken. "Major Brennan," Warner finally said, looking up from the papers. "I have before me the preliminary after-action reports from both Devil's Throat and Devil's Canyon. The tactical assessment is—" He paused, searching for the appropriate word. "Unprecedented." Sarah remained silent, waiting for what would come next. 381 Special Operations personnel safely extracted against impossible odds. A terrorist cell neutralized before they could deploy chemical and biological weapons against civilian targets. Warner set the reports aside. By any operational measure, a remarkable achievement. "Thank you, sir. I'm not finished." Warner's tone hardened slightly. "I also have before me multiple violations of standing orders, unauthorized aircraft requisition, engagement outside approved parameters, and utilization of non-standard tactical approaches that contradict established Air Force doctrine." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "Yes, sir." Warner stood, moving to the window where he could see the flight line. The damaged F-15E she had flown to Devil's Throat was visible in the maintenance area, its battle scars evident even at a distance. Under normal circumstances, these violations would result in immediate court-martial proceedings and likely dishonorable discharge. He turned back to face her. "But these are not normal circumstances." Sarah felt a shift in the room's atmosphere, a subtle change in the tension that had been present since she entered. "The Joint Chiefs have taken a personal interest in the events of the past 24 hours, Warner continued, "as has the Secretary of Defense. Your actions, while contrary to protocol, saved more American lives in a single day than most military personnel might hope to save in an entire career." He returned to his desk, lifting a different folder. "Additionally, intelligence recovered from Devil's Canyon has provided confirmation of what your father discovered 5 years ago. Evidence of a coordinated effort by elements within our own government to destabilize border security for purposes of financial and political gain." Sarah's pulse quickened. Official acknowledgement of the conspiracy that had claimed her father's life. This evidence, combined with materials recovered by the SEAL team from Devil's Throat, has triggered a classified investigation at the highest levels. Warner's expression remained professional, but Sarah detected a hint of personal satisfaction. "Several high-ranking officials have already been taken into custody for questioning." "The committee," Sarah said, speaking for the first time. Warner nodded. "A self-designated group of military and intelligence officials, defense contractors, and political operatives who saw opportunity in chaos, who profited from instability, who were willing to sacrifice American lives for their own advancement. The same people who arranged my father's death when he discovered their connection to Cordero." "Yes." Warner's acknowledgement carried the weight of official confirmation. 5 years of questions finally answered with a single word. Colonel Robert Brennan's final transmission contained enough evidence to initiate an investigation that was systematically obstructed until yesterday, when your actions forced the issue into the open. Sarah absorbed this information with outward calm, though inwardly, emotions threatened to overwhelm her professional demeanor. Her father had not died in vain. His final act of courage had planted the seed that would eventually bring his killers to justice. "In light of these extraordinary circumstances," Warner continued, "and in recognition of your exceptional service, the Secretary of Defense has authorized me to inform you that no disciplinary action will be taken regarding the events at Devil's Throat. Your actions have been reclassified as authorized under the Emergency Military Response Doctrine, Section 4.7, covering immediate threats to American personnel where standard protocols prove insufficient. Relief washed through Sarah, tempered by the knowledge that official exoneration could not erase the trauma of the past 24 hours. The lives lost, the risks taken, the wounds, both physical and psychological, that would take time to heal. Furthermore, Warner added, your engagement at Devil's Canyon has been classified as a sanctioned special operation with full authorization. All records will reflect these designations. Thank you, sir, Sarah responded, maintaining her composure. Don't thank me, Major. This comes directly from the Pentagon. Your father's reputation has been officially restored as well. His final mission will be reclassified as a counterintelligence operation that identified a significant internal security threat. Warner lifted another folder from his desk. Which brings us to the next matter, your future assignment. Sarah braced herself. Despite the absolution for her actions, she expected transfer to a non-flying position. The price of defiance, even successful defiance, was often removal from the environment where it occurred. Colonel Thompson has submitted a proposal, endorsed by Special Advisor Sterling, that I find both appropriate and necessary. Warner opened the folder. Effective immediately, you are assigned as commanding officer of the newly established Close Air Support Tactical Development Unit. Your mission will be to formalize, document, and implement the techniques pioneered by your father and validated by your own combat experience. Sarah could not hide her surprise. Not punishment, but promotion. Not exile, but endorsement. The unit will operate from the Advanced Tactical Training Center at Nellis Air Force Base, Thompson explained, speaking for the first time. You'll have authority to select your personnel, design training protocols, and develop new approaches to close air support in non-standard environments. Your father's work was ahead of its time, Major, Sterling added. Now it's time for that work to become doctrine rather than exception. Sarah struggled to process the implications. The techniques that had been dismissed as too theoretical, too dangerous, would now become official Air Force methodology. Her father's legacy enshrined in the tactical manuals that would guide future generations of pilots. I'm honored, sir, she said finally, but I'm not certain I'm the right person for this role. I'm a pilot, not an instructor. You're both, Thompson countered, and you're the only pilot who has successfully implemented these techniques in actual combat conditions. Twice. Warner nodded in agreement. The assignment carries promotion to lieutenant colonel, effective upon your acceptance. Your first task will be to compile a comprehensive analysis of both engagements, identifying key principles that can be translated into standardized operational parameters. Sarah's thoughts raced, considering the enormity of what was being offered. Not just personal vindication, but the opportunity to transform Air Force doctrine, to ensure that future pilots would have the tools they needed when conventional approaches failed, to prevent others from facing the impossible choices she had confronted alone. I accept, sir, she said, decision crystallizing with certainty. When do I begin? Immediately. But first, there's one more matter to address. Warner reached into his desk drawer and removed a small box. This belongs to you now. He handed it to Sarah, who opened it with careful reverence. Inside lay the Distinguished Flying Cross, one of the nation's highest honors for extraordinary aerial achievement. The citation accompanying it bore her father's name. The award he had been denied when his final mission was classified as mechanical failure, rather than heroic sacrifice. The Secretary of Defense has authorized posthumous award to Colonel Robert Brennan, with presentation to his next of kin. Warner's voice softened slightly. Your father exemplified the highest traditions of the United States Air Force. It's time his service was properly recognized. Sarah closed her fingers around the medal, feeling its weight and significance. The tangible symbol of her father's courage, finally acknowledged after 5 years of silence. Thank you, sir, she said, emotion threatening to break through her composure. He would have been honored. There's more, Thompson said, his own voice unusually gentle. The medal ceremony will take place next week at the Pentagon. The secretary wants to present it personally, along with something else. He handed Sarah another document, the citation for a second Distinguished Flying Cross, this one bearing her own name for extraordinary heroism and outstanding aerial achievement during the operations at Devil's Throat and Devil's Canyon. The first father-daughter recipients in the history of the decoration, Warner noted, a fitting testament to the Brennan legacy. Sarah looked down at the two citations, side by side in her hands. Father and daughter. Two pilots separated by time but united in courage, in innovation, in unwavering commitment to protecting American lives regardless of personal cost. Your transport to Nellis departs at 1400 hours, Warner said, returning to his professional demeanor. That gives you 4 hours to prepare. Colonel Thompson will brief you on the initial personnel assignments and logistical arrangements. Yes, sir, dismissed Lieutenant Colonel Brennan, and, well done. Sarah came to attention, saluted crisply, and turned to leave. As the door closed behind her, she heard Warner speak quietly to Thompson. Robert would be proud. He already was, Thompson replied. But yes, even more so now. The corridor outside stretched empty before her, offering a moment of privacy that Sarah desperately needed. The past 24 hours had been a whirlwind of action and emotion, leaving little time for personal reflection. Now, with her father's medal in one hand and her new orders in the other, the full impact of what had occurred began to register. She found a quiet alcove near the window, looking out over the desert landscape she had crossed twice under fire. The endless blue sky that had been both battlefield and sanctuary. The horizon that had seemed to hold her father's spirit, watching over her during those critical moments, when experience and instinct had merged into perfect execution. Sarah opened the medal case again, tracing her finger over her father's name engraved on the citation. "We did it, Dad," she whispered. "We finished what you started." "He always knew you would." Sarah turned to find Sterling standing a few paces away, her usual analytical expression softened by what might have been respect. "You knew him well?" Sarah asked, suddenly curious about this woman who had appeared at such a critical moment in the unfolding events. "Well enough to recognize his determination in you." Sterling moved to stand beside her at the window. "Your father identified a cancer within our system 5 years ago. A corruption that had metastasized through multiple agencies and command structures. His final transmission set in motion an investigation that has been painstakingly assembled in absolute secrecy ever since. By you? By a coalition of individuals committed to the same principles your father died protecting, people within the Department of Defense, the intelligence community, and military command who recognized the threat the committee represented." Sarah studied Sterling with new understanding. "You used me. You knew I would react exactly as I did when the SEALs were trapped. We anticipated your response based on psychological profiling and your service record." Sterling did not deny the accusation. "But we didn't manipulate events. The SEAL team was genuinely in danger. Cordero's organization posed a legitimate threat to American civilians. We simply ensured that when the moment came, you would have the opportunity to act according to your nature." "As bait," Sarah said, the tactical reality becoming clear. "You needed Cordero to believe he had another chance to eliminate the Brennan threat, to draw him into the open." Sterling nodded, unrepentant. "The operation accomplished multiple objectives simultaneously. Rescued American personnel, neutralized a terrorist organization, eliminated Diego Cordero, and provided the final evidence needed to move against the committee. At significant risk to my life. At significant risk to all involved, myself included." Sterling turned to face her directly. "The people we're dealing with have resources, influence, and absolutely no moral constraints. They've eliminated obstacles before, including high-ranking military and intelligence officers. Your father was not their first victim, but thanks to your actions, he will be among their last." Sarah absorbed this with the tactical assessment skills honed through years of training. "How many have been arrested?" 7 so far, including 2 generals and a deputy director. More will follow as evidence is processed. The investigation has expanded to include financial crimes, treason, and conspiracy to commit acts of terrorism on American soil. Will it be made public? Some aspects, eventually. Others will remain classified for national security reasons. Sterling's expression hardened slightly. "What matters is that the network has been exposed. The cancer identified and excised. Your father's final mission completed." Sarah looked down at the medals once more, considering the complex interplay of personal and professional that had defined the past 24 hours. The mission had indeed been completed, though at costs both visible and hidden. Physical damage to aircraft and infrastructure, psychological wounds that would take time to heal, lives lost on both sides of the conflict. "Your new assignment is not simply recognition of your abilities," Sterling continued after a moment. It's an acknowledgement that our tactical doctrine must evolve beyond rigid protocols that fail under specific conditions. Your father recognized this, you validated it. Now you'll institutionalize it for future generations. Ensuring no one else faces the choice I did. Follow orders and watch people die or break protocol and save them. Precisely. Sterling checked her watch. I have a transport waiting. My involvement here is concluded, at least officially. She extended her hand. A surprisingly personal gesture from a woman who had maintained professional distance throughout their interactions. Lieutenant Colonel Brennan, it has been an honor to witness your work. I suspect our paths will cross again. Sarah accepted the handshake. When they do, perhaps you'll tell me your actual role. I doubt Special Advisor covers it. A ghost of a smile touched Sterling's lips. Perhaps. Until then, remember that while the committee has been wounded, organizations like it have a way of regenerating under new names, new leadership. Remain vigilant. With that cryptic warning, Sterling departed, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts and the weight of new responsibilities. The promotion, the medal, the command assignment all represented professional achievement beyond what most officers might hope for in an entire career. Yet the personal significance ran deeper still. Vindication for her father, justice for his death, continuation of his legacy through her work. Sarah slipped both medals into her pocket and headed toward the barracks to gather her few personal belongings. In 4 hours, she would board a transport to Nellis Air Force Base to begin the next chapter of her career, to transform personal technique into institutional doctrine, to ensure that future pilots would have options when conventional approaches failed, to build something lasting from the lessons written in her father's notebook and validated through her own blood and sweat. The sound of boots on polished floor turned her attention to the approaching figure. Commander James Parker, leader of the SEAL team she had extracted from Devil's Throat, walked toward her with the measured pace of a man still recovering from recent exertion. Lieutenant Colonel Brennan, he greeted her, using the new rank with a knowing smile. Word travels fast around here. Commander Parker, I'm glad to see you up and moving. Thanks to you. Parker's expression grew more serious. I wanted to speak with you before you shipped out to Nellis, to properly express what your actions meant to my men. Sarah shook her head slightly. You don't need to thank me, Commander. I was doing my job. No, you were doing what no one else could do or would do. Parker's voice carried the unmistakable authority of a man accustomed to leading others into danger. 381 men are alive because you made a choice that placed principle above protocol. That's not something we take lightly. He reached into his pocket and removed a small object, extending it toward her on an open palm. A SEAL trident, the distinctive insignia worn only by those who had completed the brutally demanding special operations training. This belonged to Senior Chief Daniel Martinez. 30 years of service, 5 combat deployments, one of the finest warriors I've ever known. Parker's voice remained steady, but Sarah detected the emotion beneath his professional demeanor. He was wounded in the initial ambush. You flew cover during his evacuation. Sarah remembered the man without needing further description. The last SEAL to board the final helicopter, helping a wounded comrade despite his own injuries. He asked me to give you this. Said he'd earned it through sweat and blood, and you'd earned the right to carry it the same way. Parker pressed the trident into her hand. It's the highest honor one operator can bestow upon another. Sarah closed her fingers around the symbol, understanding its profound significance. Special operators rarely shared their emblems with those outside their tightly knit community. To receive such recognition was to be acknowledged as one of their own in spirit, if not in formal training. I'm honored, she said simply. Please thank Senior Chief Martinez for me. Thank him yourself. He'll be instructing at the Naval Special Warfare Center next month, just a few hours' flight from Nellis. Parker smiled slightly. I suspect you'll be seeing more of us in your new role. The techniques you employed would be invaluable for our close air support requirements. You've heard about the new unit. Like I said, word travels fast. Parker checked his watch. My team ships out in 30 minutes. We've been reassigned to track down the remaining border ghost cells before they can reorganize. Without their leadership in primary base, they'll be significantly weakened, Sarah noted. Agreed, but not eliminated. Organizations like that tend to have contingency plans. Parker's expression darkened slightly. And they may still have supporters within our system, despite the arrests. The echo of Sterling's warning sent a chill through Sarah. The conspiracy might have been wounded, but not everyone involved had been identified or apprehended. The cancer might return in new form if vigilance faltered. "Watch your back, Colonel," Parker said, as if reading her thoughts. "You've made powerful enemies, the kind who don't forget or forgive." "I'll keep that in mind, Commander." Parker nodded, then extended his hand. "Until next time." "Until next time," Sarah agreed, accepting the handshake. As Parker departed, Sarah continued toward her quarters, the seal trident a solid presence in her pocket, alongside her father's compass and their matching medals. Symbols of respect, recognition, and responsibility. Reminders of what had been accomplished and what remained to be done. Her temporary quarters at Luke Air Force Base were Spartan but sufficient. Sarah had never been one to accumulate possessions, her life defined by service rather than material comforts. Everything she owned fit into a single duffel bag, ready for rapid deployment whenever and wherever duty called. She packed methodically, her mind processing the events and revelations of the past day, the distinguished lineage she had inherited, the responsibility she now carried, the opportunity to shape Air Force doctrine for generations to come. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. She opened the door to find Colonel Thompson waiting, a tablet in his hand. "Almost ready?" he asked, stepping inside when she gestured him in. "Yes, sir, not much to pack." Thompson nodded, surveying the nearly empty room. "I've finalized the initial personnel assignments for your unit at Nellis. 6 pilots, 3 mission specialists, and a full technical support team. All volunteers, all with exceptional records." He handed her the tablet, which displayed the personnel files of her new command. Sarah scanned the names and qualifications, noting the impressive credentials of each individual. Combat-decorated pilots, advanced systems specialists, technical experts with engineering backgrounds. The kind of team that could transform theoretical concepts into practical doctrine. "You've been busy, sir," she observed, returning the tablet. "This is an exceptional group." "They need an exceptional leader." Thompson's expression softened slightly. "Your father would have been the perfect choice 5 years ago. Now that role falls to you." "I'll do my best to honor his legacy." "I know you will." Thompson hesitated, then continued in a more personal tone. "I've requested transfer to Nellis as well, as senior advisor to your unit." Sarah looked up in surprise. "Sir?" "I made a promise to your father, to look after you. For 5 years, I interpreted that as keeping you safe, keeping you away from the dangers that took him from us." Thompson's voice carried the weight of reflection and regret. "I was wrong. Looking after you means supporting you as you carry forward what he began, honoring your capabilities rather than constraining them." "I would welcome your experience, sir," Sarah said, genuinely appreciative of the gesture. "The unit will benefit from your guidance. The unit will be shaped by your vision, Colonel. I'll simply provide historical perspective and administrative interference when Pentagon bureaucracy threatens to impede progress." A rare smile crossed Thompson's features. "Something I've become quite adept at over the years." Sarah returned the smile, recognizing the gift being offered. Not oversight, but alliance. Not constraint, but support. The mentor who had known her father best, who understood the significance of what they were undertaking, committing his remaining career to ensuring its success. "Thank you, sir." Thompson nodded, then checked his watch. "Transport departs in 90 minutes. I'll meet you on the flight line." He moved toward the door, then paused. "One more thing. This arrived from the Secretary's office." He handed her a sealed envelope bearing the Department of Defense insignia. Sarah opened it after he departed, finding a handwritten note from the Secretary of Defense himself. "Lieutenant Colonel Brennan, your actions exemplify the highest traditions of the United States Air Force and the indomitable spirit of innovation that drives our continued air superiority. The techniques you and your father developed will save countless American lives in the years to come. I look forward to presenting both distinguished flying crosses next week and to witnessing the impact of your new command on the evolution of close air support doctrine. Your father would be proud. The nation is grateful." Sarah folded the note carefully and placed it in her duffel alongside the other treasured items she carried. The compass, the medals, the seal trident, physical reminders of the bonds forged through service and sacrifice. With her packing complete, Sarah took one final look around the temporary quarters that had witnessed her transformation from renegade pilot to unit commander. So much had changed in 24 hours. Her understanding of her father's death, her own place within the Air Force hierarchy. The validation of techniques once dismissed as too theoretical, too dangerous. Yet beneath the external changes, her core remained constant, the same commitment to excellence that had driven her through the academy, the same ethical foundation that had compelled her to defy orders when lives hung in the balance, the same unwavering belief that innovation, properly applied, could overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles. Sarah shouldered her duffel and left the room without looking back. The past had been honored, justice had been served. Now her focus must turn to the future, to building something lasting from the lessons so painfully learned. The Arizona sun blazed overhead as she crossed the base toward the flight line. Aircraft moved across the tarmac in the choreographed precision of military operations. Pilots and ground crew went about their duties with professional focus. The normal rhythm of base activities had resumed after the intensity of the past day's events. Yet beneath that normalcy, Sarah sensed a subtle difference in how others regarded her as she passed. Not the sidelong glances of curiosity or skepticism that had sometimes followed her as the rare female F-15E pilot. Instead, she noted expressions of respect, of recognition. Word had spread about Devil's Throat and Devil's Canyon, about the pilot who had broken protocol to save hundreds of lives, about techniques that defied conventional wisdom, yet succeeded where standard approaches would have failed. The transport aircraft waited on the far side of the flight line, its engines already running in preparation for departure. Colonel Thompson stood at the base of the loading ramp, conversing with the flight crew. Nearby, somewhat surprisingly, General Warner himself had appeared to oversee their departure. Sarah approached and came to attention, saluting crisply. "Reporting as ordered, sir." Warner returned the salute. "At ease, Colonel. I wanted to see you off personally." He handed her a sealed folder with classified markings. "Your official orders and authorization documents. Everything you'll need to establish the new unit at Nellis." "Thank you, sir." "I've also included a personal letter to General Davidson, the base commander. He was your father's classmate at the academy. He'll ensure you have the resources and support you need." Sarah accepted the folder, adding it to her duffel. "I appreciate that, sir." Warner nodded, his expression professional, yet tinged with what might have been regret. "I misjudged you yesterday, Colonel. I saw protocol violation where I should have recognized necessary innovation. That error in judgment nearly cost hundreds of American lives." "You were following established doctrine, sir, as you were trained to do." "Perhaps, but leadership sometimes requires recognizing when doctrine itself must evolve." Warner straightened slightly. "That's what your unit represents. The institutional acknowledgement that our tactics must continue to adapt to changing conditions, to unexpected challenges." "We'll do our best to honor that mission, sir." "I know you will." Warner extended his hand, a gesture of respect between officers. "Good hunting, Colonel Brennan. Make us proud." "Yes, sir." With final farewells complete, Sarah boarded the transport alongside Thompson. They secured themselves in the Spartan seating as the loadmaster closed the ramp and prepared for departure. The aircraft vibrated around them as the engines increased power, accelerating down the runway before lifting into the clear desert sky. Through the small window, Sarah watched Luke Air Force Base recede beneath them, the scene of both her greatest challenges and her greatest triumphs growing smaller with distance. Somewhere below lay Devil's Throat and Devil's Canyon, terrain features that had become pivotal in her personal and professional journey. Landscapes where her father's legacy had been validated through her own courage and skill. The transport banked northward toward Nellis Air Force Base, carrying her toward new responsibilities and opportunities, toward a future where the techniques born from her father's innovative mind and refined through her own combat experience would become standard doctrine for a new generation of pilots. Sarah removed her father's compass from her pocket, watching as the needle steadied on their new course. North, forward, onward. The simple instrument had guided countless pilots through challenging conditions, its fundamental principles unchanged despite technological advances. A reminder that sometimes the most valuable tools were those that returned to basic truths, to immutable laws of physics and navigation, just as her father's techniques had done. Stripping away accumulated doctrine to reveal the fundamental principles of flight, ordnance delivery, and terrain interaction. finding paths where none seemed to exist, creating possibilities where standard approaches saw only limitations. Thompson noticed the compass in her hand. "He carried that through 3 wars," he said quietly. Said it kept him oriented when instruments and technology failed. "He gave me my first compass when I was 8, Sarah replied, memories surfacing of childhood lessons at the kitchen table. Maps spread wide, her father teaching her to plot courses and calculate headings. Said a pilot should always know exactly where they stand in relation to where they're headed. Wise advice for more than just navigation. Sarah nodded, closing her fingers around the compass once more before returning it to her pocket. The past 24 hours had certainly clarified where she stood and where she was headed, had transformed uncertainty into purpose, had converted personal technique into institutional doctrine. The desert landscape stretched endlessly below them, a testament to the harsh beauty of the American Southwest. The same terrain that had claimed so many lives throughout history now offered opportunity for innovation, for advancement, for the evolution of aerial combat tactics. In the distance, the first glimpse of Nellis Air Force Base appeared on the horizon, the sprawling complex that would become home to the Close Air Support Tactical Development Unit, the place where Brennan Doctrine would transition from individual technique to standardized methodology, where her father's legacy would be enshrined in the tactical manuals that would guide future generations of pilots. Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders, not as burden but as purpose. The lives saved yesterday were just the beginning. Countless more would be protected in years to come as the techniques she and her father had pioneered became standard training for pilots facing similar challenges. "Almost there," Thompson noted as the transport began its descent. "Ready to make history?" Sarah smiled slightly, the first genuine smile since the crisis began. "History's already been made, sir. Now we just need to write it down so others can learn from it." The aircraft descended toward Nellis, carrying not just personnel and equipment, but ideas, innovations, evolutions in tactical doctrine that would reshape how the Air Force approached its most challenging missions. Ideas born from one pilot's insight, validated through another's courage, soon to become institutional wisdom. As the wheels touched down on the Nellis runway, Sarah Brennan felt her father's presence more strongly than at any time since his death. Not as ghost or memory, but as living legacy, as concepts and principles that would save lives long after both their names had faded from active service. The transport taxied to a stop, its engine spooling down as ground crew approached with the stairs. Through the window, Sarah could see the welcoming committee waiting on the tarmac, senior officers, technical specialists, the team that would help transform individual innovation into institutional doctrine. "Welcome to your new command, Colonel," Thompson said as they prepared to disembark. Sarah gathered her duffel, feeling the weight of its precious contents. The compass that had guided her father through 3 wars and would now guide her through the challenges ahead. The medals that recognized their shared commitment to duty above self. The seal trident that acknowledged her actions in the eyes of America's most elite warriors. Symbols of the past that would inform the future she was about to create. "Thank you, sir," she replied, moving toward the exit. "But this isn't just my command. It's my father's legacy, and the beginning of something much larger than either of us." The door opened to the bright Nevada sunshine, the dry desert air washing over her as she stepped onto the stairs. Below, her new team waited to begin the work that would transform American close air support capabilities for decades to come. Work that had begun with one pilot's innovative thinking, continued through another's courage under fire, and would now become institutional doctrine through their combined efforts. Sarah descended the stairs, each step carrying her further from the past and closer to the future she would help create. A future where no pilot would face the impossible choice between following protocol and saving lives, where innovation and doctrine would work in harmony rather than opposition, where her father's final gift to her would become her own gift to generations of pilots yet to come. The Brennan legacy, written not in words, but in contrails across the desert sky, in lives saved and missions accomplished, in the continuous evolution of what was possible when skill married to courage refused to accept the limitations of conventional wisdom. As her boots touched the Nellis tarmac, Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Brennan felt the full circle of her journey complete. From the young girl watching Desert Storm footage with her father's model plane clutched tight, to the Academy graduate receiving her wings from his proud hands, to the renegade pilot defying orders to save lives, to the unit commander who would transform personal technique into institutional doctrine. The compass in her pocket seemed to pulse with significance, its needle pointing not just north, but forward, toward a future built on her father's foundation, but shaped by her own vision, toward challenges yet unknown and innovations yet undiscovered, toward the endless horizon that had always called to pilots like her father and herself, toward the legacy they would share not just as father and daughter, but as pioneers who had rewritten what was possible when America's finest took to the skies. Author's note to my readers. Dear friends, thank you for taking this journey with me through Sarah Brennan's story. As I put the final words on this page, I find myself thinking about why I chose to write this particular tale, and what I hope it means to you. I've always been drawn to stories about people who face impossible choices. Not the easy decisions where right and wrong are clearly marked, but those agonizing moments when every option carries a terrible cost. Sarah faced that choice twice in 24 hours. Follow orders and watch good people die, or break the rules and risk everything to save them. I think many of you have faced similar moments in your own lives, perhaps not in a fighter jet over the desert, but in hospital rooms, corporate boardrooms, or family crises, where you had to choose between what the rulebook said and what your conscience demanded. This is also a story about legacy and the bonds between parent and child. Robert Brennan couldn't be there to guide his daughter through her darkest hour, but his teachings, his notebook, his compass, all became her lifeline when she needed them most. I wrote this for every parent who wonders if their lessons will stick, and for every son or daughter who carries their parents' wisdom into battles those parents will never see. For those of you who served in uniform, or whose loved ones did, you'll recognize the tension between following orders and following your moral compass. The military can't function without discipline and protocol, yet sometimes those very protocols become obstacles to the mission they're meant to serve. Sarah's story asks a difficult question. When does courage become insubordination? And when does obedience become cowardice? I don't claim to have the answer, but I believe it's a question worth wrestling with. To my readers who've lost loved ones to circumstances that never quite added up, who've spent years searching for truth in redacted documents and official silences, Sarah's 5-year quest to understand her father's death will resonate deeply. Sometimes justice takes longer than we'd like. Sometimes vindication comes only after we've already paid the price. I also wanted to write about excellence without apology. Sarah Brennan is brilliant at what she does, and she knows it. She doesn't diminish her abilities to make others comfortable, doesn't wait for permission to use her gifts when lives hang in the balance. In my experience, women of your generation often had to be twice as good to be considered half as competent. I wanted to write a woman who was simply the best, who earned it through hard work, and who used that excellence without hesitation when it mattered most. Finally, this is a story about innovation versus tradition. Robert Brennan saw beyond the limitations of established doctrine, and his daughter proved those innovations worked when it counted. How many times in your own careers, your own lives, have you seen someone with a better way of doing things get shut down because that's not how we've always done it? How many lives might have been saved, how much suffering avoided, if we'd been willing to question our assumptions sooner? I hope Sarah's story entertained you, moved you, maybe even made you think differently about the choices we face when principle collides with protocol. More than that, I hope it reminded you of your own moments of courage, your own impossible choices, and the legacies you've built for those who will follow after you. Thank you for reading. Thank you for caring about these characters as much as I do. And thank you for the honor of your time and attention. With deep respect and gratitude, your storyteller.